The sorceress Richetia is the queen of the underworld and the most beautiful flower. Wherever the girl went, she left behind an enchanting aroma, and the heroine's red eyes resembled roses. But Richetia has a cruel character. The girl did not spare anyone who stood in her way. In the underworld, despite the fact that the heroine did not give anyone peace, people could not help but worship her beauty and strength. Richetia was always the center of attention, but one day she suddenly disappeared. And the girl's sudden disappearance gave rise to all sorts of speculations. Some believed that the heroine was arrested by the Inquisitor of Heretics and imprisoned in the Holy See. Others thought that Richetia had been eaten by the carnivorous flowers she grew. There were many assumptions, but even if people knew the truth, they would never believe it, because even the heroine herself cannot believe what is happening. The most beautiful woman in the world, a legendary villain who lived for her own good, was transformed into a 5-year-old child. And all this is a long story that began on the day of Richetia's birth. A month ago, a servant told the girl that Count Villain had secretly adopted a child. Continuing, the young man also said that the Count was hiding his identity and going around the orphanage one by one. Heta himself was a beastman of the canine race, Richetia's loyal ward and her scout. And the young man had already come up with a brilliant plan. The young man thinks it would be a good idea to pretend to be the head of the orphanage and approach the Count. But the heroine called this plan bad, because such a temporary approach is not enough and more information needs to be obtained. And continuing, Richetia said that she would turn herself into a child and force the Count to adopt her. Hearing this, Hata was horrified and told the girl that it was too dangerous. However, the heroine herself believed that she should take such a risk, since Villain's servants were known for their loyalty and silence. So Richetia thought it would be better if she infiltrated there herself. Moreover, the girl had finally found the trail of those who had ruined her life and did not want to delay. The heroine's mother was a mad fairy, and as we know, she died immediately after her birth. From the woman, Richetia inherited her abilities and was rejected by the fairy world after birth. And only after some time did the girl learn the secret of her birth. 5 years ago, the main character turned 15. Until this moment, Richetia didn't even know that she was a fairy and was simply spending happy days in the orphanage. Even though the girl didn't have parents, everything was fine because she had the kindest headmistress and her friends. However, everything changed as soon as the fairy power awakened in the main character. At that moment, Richetia cringed in pain, causing panic among her loved ones. And the men who were watching what was happening from the street were already happy that they would be paid good money for the recently awakened fairy. So, without further ado, the strangers lit the torches and decided to start the hunt. In the human world, fairy creatures were a commodity, so hunters attacked the shelter. And absolutely everyone died except the main character. After what happened, Richetia began to cry heavily and blame herself for the fact that everyone died because she was a fairy. And that's how the girl lost everything. Life on the run from hunters was terrible. The main character had nowhere to hide. The only thing Richetia needed was strength. And in the end, the girl chose revenge using that very power of fairies. Having mastered this power to perfection, the main character began to look for the culprit who destroyed her life. The fairy hunters are just middlemen, and there are people who organized all this and stand above them. Richetia will not forgive anyone, so she decided to become a villain herself. And after many years of tracking, the girl managed to find out something. The main character's mother went crazy after experiments were conducted on her. And Richetia inherited this tainted blood, so she had powers different from other fairies. There were rumors that one of the 3 great noble families of the Palan Empire was conducting cruel experiments on fairies. However, the girl can't just get close to these nobles, so she looked for another way to do it and finally found it. Villain is one of the 3 great noble families of the Palan Empire, and these people are considered one of the most secretive families, about which there is almost no information, including Count Villain himself, who was known to everyone as a nobleman, but no one saw his face, and any external activity of the rest of the family members was extremely rare. The Countess died several years ago, and all that is known about Villain's children is that they were 3 sons who were confirmed as successors. And because the family is so secretive, this is the most suspicious place for Richetia. The main character also assumed that Villain wanted to adopt a child in order to experiment on him. Kata continued to consider the girl's idea dangerous and was against it. But Richetia reminded the young man of his promise, and he immediately agreed with her, upset, saying that he would prepare a potion that would make her a child. Hearing this, the heroine asked the assistant to make her at least a 10-year-old child, since otherwise it would be difficult for her to collect information. And that's how Richetia became 5-year-old Chessa. The girl was unhappy that instead of a 10-year-old child, she had turned into someone who couldn't even speak normally. Moreover, a month has already passed since the heroine arrived at this shelter, and Count Vasilian is still nowhere to be seen. And Chesa can't stay in such a bad place any longer. The shelter where the girl lived before was clean, and they even gave her food. And here people are so obsessed with money that they don't care about children. And also the main character was very irritated by her peers. But while Chesa was thinking about all this, other children called her, informing her that there was a nobleman and a luxurious carriage outside. Hearing this, the girl immediately became inspired and, shaking herself off, headed out into the street. And the main character was shocked by what she saw. Good, thoroughbred horses, a luxurious carriage, and a worthy servant. And looking at everything, Chesa assumed that it was that same Count Erwin Vasilian who had arrived. At that moment, the young man himself announced that he was going to take a child into his family. The main character, having heard this and being convinced that this was the person she needed, was very happy. And while the woman was offering Erwin tea, Chesa mentally noted that he really did look stern. And the Count, refusing tea, explained that it was a waste of time. And continuing, the young man showed where he wanted to begin the examination. Hearing this, the girl realized that she needed to somehow attract Erwin's attention. After all, judging by the Count's appearance, he is already beginning to lose patience, and, if this continues, Chesa will remain unnoticed. And while the heroine was thinking about this, the young man was already heading for the exit, saying that he did not see a child who would suit him. However, at that moment the girl attracted attention with a scream and stopped the Count, because Chesa had been waiting for a whole month and couldn't miss her chance. Therefore, trying to get out of the crowd, the main character began asking Erwin to take her away. And when the girl approached, the young man asked why he should take her. At this, the main character frowned a little and replied that the young man should take her because she was charming, and Chesa believed that this was the only way to make Erwin choose her. After all, the Count deliberately emitted a murderous aura in order to find a child who could withstand at least that amount of it. That is, a young man needs a completely fearless baby. And while the girl was thinking about this, Erwin approached her, asking her name. Hearing this, the main character became a little nervous, but replied that her name was Chesa. After these words, the young man frowned again and noticed that Chesa looked very similar to someone. The girl didn't understand this at all and began to think about what the Count was talking about. At that moment, the young man himself took the heroine in his arms and announced that he was taking her. And continuing, Erwin told the girl that from today on he was her dad. Chesa, seeing the Count's smile, was a little scared since she did not understand why the atmosphere had changed so abruptly. And when the heroes left, all the other children trembled with fear and worried about the girl. At this time, Chesa, sitting on the young man's lap, felt very uncomfortable, and the young man immediately noticed this, noticing that the main character was fidgeting. Then, continuing, Erwin suggested that the girl was not used to having a father. Therefore, the young man prepared a gift for Chesa. And after these words, the Count put 2 bracelets on the main character's hands. The girl herself was very outraged, as she realized that a mana suppressor had been placed on her. However, Chesa didn't find it strange because she was sure that Erwin couldn't accept her so easily, and the young man clearly wanted to check whether the heroine had really turned into a child. But ever since the girl drank the potion from Hata, it has become impossible to find her, because the power of beastmen and other mythical creatures is different from mana. And thinking about this, Chesa thanked the young man for the gift, but noted that it was a little heavy for her. And looking at the Count's smile, the heroine mentally asked him what it would be like to be the one who uses a mana suppressor on an innocent child. At that moment, the young man himself took off his suppressors and said that he had taken the wrong gift, so he would give the bracelet later. Erwin also told the girl that if she wanted anything, she could just let him know, and the young man will fulfill all of Chesa's wishes. However, in return, the Count also has one request. Therefore, the main character only needs to promise the young man to fulfill one request. The girl, feeling an ominous feeling, realized that there was definitely some purpose in her adoption, and Chesa assumed that, as she thought, the Duke's family had been experimenting on fairies. While the main character was thinking about this, the carriage was stopped by knights in order to conduct an inspection. When Erwin asked about the purpose of the inspection, the employees said that they were looking for the witch Richetia. Chesa was surprised at first when she heard this, but then she realized that it made sense, considering the commotion she had caused. However, at this moment the Count noticed that the girl had been quite quiet lately, and the heroine immediately mentally assumed that Erwin was following her movements, but she did not understand why he had an interest in her, who was in the criminal world. The Count did not want to give his name, and the knights warned that they would not be able to let him in without identifying him. That's why the boys also want Erwin to get out of the carriage. But the young man replied that this would be problematic, since he would like to keep the fact that he had adopted a child a secret. And after these words, the Count's eyes became brighter, and he said that everyone present should forget about what had happened. And the knights, under the influence of Mana, instantly froze and reported that they understood the young man. Chesa was shocked by this, since the dark arts are forbidden even in the Empire, and one of the greatest aristocrats turns out to be a dark magician. Erwin himself turned to the girl, apologizing and noting that she had seen something unpleasant, but there was no other choice, since the knights were too stubborn. And having said this, the young man snapped his fingers to speed up the carriage and said that since it had come to this, it was necessary to go faster. The heroine, looking around, noticed that the area had instantly changed. This means that all of this is also black magic, because once Erwin revealed his abilities, there is no point in hiding. While Chesa was thinking about this, she and the young man reached the Vasilian estate. And the young man, calling the heroine his daughter, invited her to the Castle of Snakes. Sometime later, somewhere in the forest, the Inquisitor caught the criminal. And the intruder, seeing who exactly was standing in front of him, panicked even more. It was Hylon, who was the Inquisitor of the Holy Empire of Hilderd. And the young man informed the criminal that now that he had entered into a contract with the Forbidden Power, he must be killed. And at the moment when Hylon dealt with the man, knights ran up to him. Seeing his team, the young man asked them about news about the witch. And one of the knights replied that they were checking everything, but no information had come in yet. Hylon immediately remembered how Ratisha, hanging over him, called him her prey. And the main character also asked the young man not to die so carelessly. However, now the young man wondered where Ratisha herself had disappeared to. At this time, the girl was lying in bed very unhappy. After all, once again Erwin decided to put the main character to bed. A week had already passed since Chesa had arrived at the estate, but the Count still followed her around. The girl wants to get out of this body as quickly as possible, but because of Erwin she can't do or find out anything. All this made the main character feel like the young man had found out about her true identity and was now simply mocking her. But Chesa is still sure that the young man is hiding something. Erwin is a dark mage, and on a continent where the church has great influence, this is forbidden by the sacred empire of Hilderd. And the fallen empire is also under the strong control of the Holy Empire. Therefore, anyone who uses dark power will certainly be executed. And Erwin is not just some dark magician. He is of the highest level, and is even capable of mind control. And Chesa believed that with such a life, an ordinary person would not get involved with dark magic. So the main character definitely needs to understand what the Count is counting on. While the girl was thinking about this, Erwin suggested that she couldn't sleep and offered to sing a lullaby. And just as Chesa began to mentally resent the young man's pretense, he actually began to sing and caused her even greater displeasure. Although, if this were the heroine's mother's lullaby, she would only be happy. The girl barely remembers anything from the time before she was sent to the orphanage. However, Chesa still remembers her mother's lullaby, faintly, but still clearly. And nothing ever sounded as terrible as Irvine's song. But still, while the main character was thinking about this, she began to fall asleep. After some time, the girl woke up and was unhappy that her stamina had become very low. And the Count, seeing that Chesa had woken up, remarked that now was the ideal time for this, since something interesting was happening outside. After these words, the young man took the heroine in his arms and carried her to the window. And continuing, the young man reported that the Shazy brothers were returning home. Almost nothing is known about the boys themselves. The heroine only knows that the eldest has turned 13, and the younger twins are 11 years old. Erwin, having told her about his sons, offered the girl a job, and Chesa, although she didn't understand why they were constantly hiring her and not giving her personal time, agreed. The Count himself, having brought the main character into his office, said that he needed to leave for a while. And then the young man also asked if Chesa could be alone, to which she immediately answered positively. And while the girl was rejoicing at the fact that she would finally be alone, Erwin invited someone into the room. It was Belson Vasilian, the eldest son of the Count's house of Vasilian. The boy was not very pleased with Chesa's presence, but when the Count asked about the strange things outside, Belson replied that now was the time to check the Black Forest. The heroine sat there gloomy, not understanding what kind of black forest this was and why the boy was looking at her like that. The Black Forest is a cursed place where there is never any sunlight, monsters lurk, and no one dares to enter. Right in the heart of the forest, there is even a snake lair, and according to Cheza, this adds to the mystery of the Vasilian family. And while the main character was thinking about this, Belson announced his departure and headed for the exit. But the Count stopped the boy with a question about whether he thought that he and Cheza were somehow similar. At this, Belson became angry and asked Erwin to keep this nonsense to himself and not drag innocent people into his madness. The girl mentally noted that the conversation was very tense, and the young man, assuming that the heroine was surprised, explained that his elders were a little rude. After these words, the Count stroked Cheza on the head and said that it was time for him to go. Erwin also warned the girl that he would return late, so she did not need to wait for him. The heroine herself thought that this was already the second time he said that she looked like someone. The first time was at the shelter, and the second time is now in front of Belson. And in the heroine's opinion, if Erwin really meant Richenzia, then her adoption was not a simple coincidence. That's why the girl is very interested in what the Count is trying to achieve. Thinking about this, Cheza asked the young man who she looked like. The young man was a little confused at this and was unable to answer right away. But having thought of what to say, Erwin said that he would tell everything when he returned home. However, the main character must wait patiently for the Count. And after these words, the young man said goodbye to Cheza and she waved back. The girl herself was already sure that something was happening in the estate. Therefore, deciding not to delay, the main character decided to find out absolutely everything about this Count's family today. And as soon as Cheza finds out everything, he will say goodbye to the estate. However, at that moment the girl felt someone's presence. And while the main character was looking around, someone grabbed her and covered her mouth with a hand. The kidnapper then warned Cheza that she should be quiet or she would die. On the street, another young man noticed that his partner had returned even earlier than he thought. The young man himself was a little scared and said that he needed to hurry and get out of this terrible place. When his partner asked him if he had tied up the heroine, the kidnapper said yes, saying that he did not understand why Vasilian had ordered her to be kidnapped. For Cheza, the boys didn't seem like a problem, and she thought about killing them. At this point, the criminals began to discuss the girl's appearance, as they considered her very familiar. And after a couple of seconds, the boys realized that the main character was Richisha. Hearing this, the girl mentally assumed that she was causing a lot of trouble by rummaging around the estate in this body, since she would still be recognized. And after thinking about it, Cheza decided that the criminals could not be left alive. But as soon as the heroine began to use magic, someone approached the young men, inquiring about their identity. It was Ishuel Basilian, the third son of the Basilian family. Upon seeing the boy, the criminals immediately panicked and said that they were simply delivering flowers and were already leaving. However, Ishuel did not believe anyone, and asking them to be silent, headed towards the girl. As he approached, the boy noted that the young men were definitely not delivering flowers, and then, turning to Cheza, suggested that she was his adopted sister. And continuing, Ishuel expressed his surprise at the beauty of the heroine because he had never seen anyone as beautiful as him. The boy was also curious why Cheza wasn't crying, and he thought she was stupid. And at that moment, the criminals decided not to stand still and kill 2 children at once. However, as soon as the young men were about to attack, everything instantly went up in the air. After all, initially, Ishuel wanted to wait until the girl cried and asked for help. But since the criminals decided to speed up their death, the boy will help. And having said this, Ishuel killed the young men and covered the main character with an umbrella so that the blood would not get on her. And seeing that Cheza still hadn't cried, the boy was again a little surprised and rhetorically asked her when she would give him her tears. The main character herself was shocked by what was happening and mentally noted that everyone in this estate was crazy. At this time, Belson was sitting with papers and suddenly there was a knock on his office door. It was Ishuel, who immediately expressed his admiration for the girl. And continuing, the boy said that he wanted Cheza to belong to him. But Belson, realizing that his brother had saved the heroine, called his actions useless. And the girl herself, hearing this, was mentally indignant because although she did not expect to be accepted as one of their own, she did not think that they would treat her so heartlessly. At that moment, Ishuel, pointing at the girl, remarked that it would be great if there was something so cute and beautiful in their house. And besides, Cheza is fearless, so she will fit well into the Vasilian family. Listening to all this, Belson began to think that his brother did not understand that it was not just about adoption, but he replied that he understood everything and thought that it would be good fun. After these words, the boy immediately frowned and assumed that his brother intended to support his father's latest madness. But Ishuel replied that he was not sure about that. However, the boy thinks that it would be nice to have such a cute sister at home. Belson, calling his brother crazy, turned to Cheza and said that he would help her escape. But the girl, thinking about her investigation, said that she liked the estate. Belson was a little taken aback by this and asked the main character why she liked it there. And Cheza, after thinking for a bit, explained that she liked her dad. Hearing this, the boys thought that the heroine had gone crazy since she liked the Count. And turning to the girl, Belson noted that she couldn't even imagine what could happen to her in this place. The boy then asked Ishwel if he knew about their father's plan. After all, the Count wants to bring the dead back to life, and Belson thinks this is a bad idea. Hearing this, Cheza was shocked, since denying death means going against the gods of one's own free will, and that's why something like this has a high price. Even among the wicked mages, resurrection magic is a cruel taboo, so the heroine does not understand the Count's actions at all. And while the girl was thinking about this, Ishwel told his brother that he was not going to sacrifice her. Belson agreed with this, as he also did not want to become part of the disgusting business. However, the boy was suddenly interrupted by a familiar voice. It was Erwin, who was unhappy that his children were discussing something without him. Cheza, realizing that the Count was planning a resurrection ritual, mentally assumed that it was because of one incident. About 15 years ago, Erwin said he fell in love with a girl he met by chance in the Black Forest. No one knew the girl's status or the reason why she ended up in the forest, but the Count was so enchanted by her that he went to the Emperor to grant her status and marry her. The heroes had a good relationship, so soon 3 sons were born and everything looked as if their happiness would last forever. But one day, the Countess died unexpectedly. The cause of the girl's death was never disclosed. However, after the death of the Countess, Erwin, who rarely appeared in public anymore, completely withdrew into himself. And so it was until the day when a young man came to the shelter to take the child. Thinking about it, Cheza noted to herself that the fact that the Count idolized his wife was well known, and she should have understood everything when she found out that he was a dark magician. At this point, Belson said that the noxious fumes of the Black Forest had clouded his father's mind and, asking him to come in quickly, threw him a handkerchief. And the young man, wiping his hands, expressed his joy that his sons had become closer to their new sister. Then, approaching the girl, the Count said that he missed her so much that he came home as soon as he returned from the forest. And taking Cheza in his arms, Erwin called it absurd to use her for sacrifices because she was very cute. Therefore, continuing, the young man asked the heroine not to listen to the brother's nonsense, because there is only one thing the young man wants from Cheza, and Erwin wants the girl to get the crown of the fairy kingdom for him. So, having said this, the Count informed the main character that they would go to the Holy Empire together. The crown of the fairy kingdom is an item that the fairy queen was required to give to the Holy King when she elevated him to the gods. This is a secret relic of the sacred Hildur Empire, and very little is known about its capabilities. Cheza only knows that only children under 5, the sacred king and the fairies could touch the crown. But because the crown was made by non-divine beings, fairies, it sparked controversy about whether it was worthy of being kept as a sacred relic. After much discussion, it was decided to remove the crown from the list of sacred relics and hold a prayer meeting to award it to a child who would prove his loyalty to the empire. And this meeting, for which the Count was looking for a child, will take place in a few months. Cheza had heard rumors that the crown had been spotted in the criminal underworld, but the army had never wanted it. And although the girl did not understand what the Count wanted to do with the crown, she assumed that he would do everything to get it. However, the main character herself does not want to pray, even if her life is at stake. Moreover, the Holy Empire has not only paladins, but also inquisitors stationed there. And if Cheza meets Halon, she will definitely be in trouble. Moreover, being part of the criminal world and not a saint, the girl is completely incompatible with the Holy Empire, just like Erwin. And thinking about this, the heroine decided that she needed to run, because now that she knew the Count's goal, she had no reason to stay. Although Cheza is bothered by the fact that the young man's target is an object associated with fairies, her own life is still more important to her. Therefore, the girl believes that she needs to leave as soon as possible. And the main character prepared the Rose of Invisibility just for this purpose. However, suddenly someone walking behind Cheza stepped on the petal, and then the boy expressed his surprise at the smell of flowers and petals right in the estate. This was the second son of the Basilian family, Karka Basilian. Seeing the boy, the main character panicked and was outraged that everything had come together so coincidentally. And just a few minutes later, Cheza was sitting in the bushes, hoping that she had managed to break away from Karhi. The main character also didn't understand why the boy had such a good sense of smell. After all, the girl herself almost lost the flower while trying to escape from Karhi, and as soon as Cheza caught her breath and decided to get out, a boy found her. Karha himself immediately asked the heroine what she was doing there and found it strange that, following the petals, he found her. The girl was very confused and replied that she had just gone out for a walk. To this, the boy handed Cheza a flower he had found along the way and asked if it belonged to her. But hearing a negative answer, Karha thought about it, because the smell was very similar. And having said this, the boy approached the main character to smell her. Cheza herself began to become even more nervous, as she began to feel that she had been exposed in a very absurd way. However, the heroes were suddenly attracted by the ringing of a bell, and Karha immediately assumed that unexpected guests had arrived. Therefore, taking the main character in his arms, the boy decided to go to the main gate and check everything. At this time, near the gate, Count Rudin expressed his dissatisfaction with the behavior of Erwin, who received the imperial decree. The young man himself did not understand why the man did not come during the day, and continuing, Erwin politely asked the count to make everything public. To which the man replied that the young man must immediately go to the palace, as this was the emperor's order, and disobedience would be considered treason. Also, Cheza, whom Erwin recently adopted into the family, must also appear at the palace. The girl herself, hearing this, began to feel anxious, but did not understand why. The main character was also outraged that she and Erwin were ordered to go to the capital in the middle of the night. At that moment, the man mounted his horse and told the heroes to hurry, and Erwin remarked that it was very rude to call them somewhere at such an hour. Besides, the young man was already upset about Cheza's disappearance. The girl was shocked by these words, as she did not think that the count had noticed that she had left. Erwin, taking the heroine in his arms, said that he was very surprised when he did not find her in the room and wanted to organize a search. After these words, the count noticed his son and suggested that the girl had gone for a walk with him, to which she immediately agreed. And Karha himself noticed that Erwin was behaving very sentimentally, just like he had behaved with his mother. And the boy thinks that this is all because Cheza reminds the count of his wife. Hearing this, the main character realized that all this time, when she was compared to someone, they were talking about the deceased countess. But the girl still doubted that this was the real reason for such dramatic behavior. After all, the only thing Cheza has in common with the countess is her hair color, because the beauty of fairies is made of illusions and man cannot match it. And while the main character was thinking about this, Erwin announced that since they had found her, it was time for everyone to get ready to leave, because the heroes are heading to the Imperial Palace right now. The very next day, the girl and the count were sitting in the Imperial Palace, and while Erwin noted that nothing had changed inside, the heroine did not understand how she always found herself in such strange situations. At that moment, the young man asked the count when they could have an audience with His Majesty, and the man said to be more patient, because before meeting the emperor, the heroes must see someone. Therefore, after these words, the count asked the Holy Knight of the Empire, Hildur, to show himself. And Cheza, seeing Helan, was horrified, not understanding why he was here. Only 13 people can be inquisitors of the Holy Empire, and they have enormous power, including the right to execute and pardon. As high-ranking clergy, second in rank to the Holy King and the Cardinals, the Inquisitors operate undercover and maintain order across the continent. Among the Inquisitors, Helan is the only one who can wield the sacred relic, the Chains of Judgment, and is therefore seen as proof of God's will. And before Cheza became a child, the young man pursued her relentlessly. And now, although the heroine knew that the Inquisitors were disguised as holy knights, she did not expect to meet Helan in the palace. And as soon as the girl mentally expressed her hope that the young man would not recognize her in the form of a child, he looked at her in shock. Seeing this, Cheza immediately turned away and realized that the situation had taken a bad turn. Helan himself walked towards the main character and thereby caused her even more panic. However, as soon as the young man came closer and wanted to touch Cheza, Erwin grabbed his hand. And looking sternly at Helan, the count asked what business he had with his daughter. To this, the Inquisitor apologized and explained that the girl reminded him of someone. But Erwin found it strange that a 5-year-old child could remind him of someone, and the count did not like these words, since such an attitude was disrespectful to Helan. Hearing this, the young man decided not to argue any further, and offering to get acquainted, gave his name. Helan, without delay, also introduced himself in response. After these words, Erwin asked the young man about the purpose of his visit, since he was hoping to speak privately with the emperor. and Halon said that it was he who asked the heroes to come, as he needed to verify the identity of the child who would be present at the sacred prayer meeting. So the young man wants the Count to step aside for a while. Erwin didn't like this, and asked if the Saint of the Empire always carried out such a sudden inspection. And Halon explained that no external factors influence this, it is inevitable, especially when the subject of this collection was once a sacred relic. Continuing, Halon suggested that the Count understood the importance of the check and was therefore asking for assistance. Hearing this, Erwin noted that since the young man was speaking in the language of threats, he was forced to give in. However, the Count also warned that something like this should not happen again. And while Cheza was mentally asking Erwin not to leave, he stroked her head and told her to call immediately if anything happened. The young man then reminded the heroine that she only had to do one thing right. And for everything to work out today, the girl must not make a single mistake. After these words, the young man said that he would be back soon and walked out the door. Cheza herself, left alone with the Inquisitor, began to become even more nervous, because the heroine didn't know what the young man wanted to check first, and what to tell her if he recognized her. Halon, coming closer to the girl, noticed that no matter how he looked at her, she reminded him of someone. And without delay, the young man assumed that the heroine was Richicia's daughter and asked about it. The girl was shocked by this and mentally called Halon's words nonsense. Richicia's strong connection with the young man dates back to quite a long time ago. The first meeting of the heroes took place at a turning point in their destinies. The girl was tired of hiding, and Halon was then a promising student of the Knights of the Holy Empire. And the main character asked the young man to kill her, but he did not fulfill this wish. Much time has passed since that meeting, and the heroes have become sworn enemies. One pursues, the other flees. And if Halon and Recenzia are destined to die, they believe it must be at each other's hands. Because there is a fine line of relationships between the characters that cannot be described in words. But Cheza was still outraged that the young man who knew her situation better than anyone thought she was spending time on the relationship. Halon himself, not hearing an answer, assumed that he had asked the question too early, and having learned the name of the heroine, the Inquisitor asked whether anyone had forced her to attend the prayer meeting. After all, if Cheza is forced to do this, then the young man can help her. But the girl immediately replied that she didn't need any help. And after these words, Halon decided to ask the heroine again about her mother and what she looked like. Cheza, having said that she knew nothing, was shocked that the young man so quickly returned to talking about her. The Inquisitor himself, hearing this, began to unbutton his shirt. The girl was horrified by this and immediately moved to the other end of the sofa, thinking that Halon had gone crazy. And while Cheza was screaming in shock, the young man showed her the mark on his chest and asked if she had seen it. Seeing the rose, the heroine calmed down as she realized that Halon wanted to talk about the sign she made. However, at this point, Erwin interrupted the conversation, assuming that the Inquisitor wanted to die. After all, it is very strange for a holy knight to undress in front of a 5-year-old child. And besides, Halon can ask the girl all her questions while wearing clothes. And noticing the witch's mark, Erwin wondered why the young man hadn't gotten rid of it, since a holy knight would have cut out his own skin to remove it. After these words, Halon himself assumed that the Count knew Richicia and asked about it. And this angered Erwin, because he realized that the young man did all this in order to ask Cheza about the witch's whereabouts. So the Count, taking the candlestick, said that the girl had no connection with Richicia, so Halon should stop testing his patience. The heroine herself was a little taken aback, as she realized that the situation was getting tense, and the young men could really fight. At this point, Halon explained that every child who went to prayer meeting was assigned a knight to accompany them, and so the young man was appointed as a knight to accompany the Count's family. Erwin considered all this not as an escort, but as supervision, and Halon told him to perceive it as he wanted. And the Inquisitor also warned the Count that he had better watch his behavior, since there were many spectators there. After these words, Halon headed towards the exit, telling the young man that they would see each other on the day of departure to the Holy Empire. Cheza immediately exhaled, mentally thanking the Count for standing up for her. However, the girl still found it strange that Erwin knew not only about her, but also her sign. Thinking about this, the main character asked the young man to hug her. After all, Cheza decided that if escape was impossible for now, she might as well continue pretending and see where it would lead. And once in Erwin's arms, the girl asked him where he had gone. And the young man said that he had been at a meeting with His Majesty. A little earlier, the Emperor had remarked that the Count had come a long way. And continuing, the man apologized for such a sudden call. And then His Majesty suddenly remembered Hylon and asked the young man if he had seen him. However, after these words, the young man himself noticeably darkened. And the Emperor, seeing this, panicked a little, assuming that something had happened. Erwin asked the man to be honest and, grabbing him by the collar, said that Hylon was an inquisitor. And continuing, the young man asked the Emperor for what purpose he had exposed Cheza to the Inquisitor's attack. Already at the present time, Erwin told the girl that he and His Majesty had had a good talk, but he hurried back, thinking that she had already been waiting for him for too long. And when Cheza asked whether she should meet with the Emperor, the Count replied that there was no need to see the old pig. And after these words, the young man invited the heroine to finish their journey through the palace. Once outside, Erwin told the girl that if she liked something, she could let him know and he would order the same thing for her home. And then the young man asked Cheza about the topic of her conversation with the knight. The heroine, realizing that an honest answer would not help, said that Hylon asked her about having a dog, and she said that they didn't have one. To this, Erwin smiled a little and replied that the girl had done everything correctly, but he wondered if the knight had said anything strange. Hearing this, Cheza realized that the young man was still troubled by what had happened, and the heroine assumed that the Count was afraid that she would change her mind about prayer because of Hylon, or that all this would have a bad effect on his family's reputation. After thinking about it, Cheza decided that this was a great opportunity to strengthen her trust with the young man. And stroking Erwin's hair, the main character said that she would always be on his side. Therefore, the young man should not worry. The Count was very touched by this, but he noted that it was not at all necessary for Cheza to understand such things. A few days later, Cheza was walking through the garden of Amelia Vasilian's mansion. There were more than 3 months left until the small prayer meeting of the saints, so the heroes decided to stay in the capital to rest. From the moment Cheza and the Count returned from the imperial palace, he began to disappear frequently. And the girl assumed that it was because of that situation in the garden, since it was the first time she saw Erwin like that. The heroine is also interested in why the Count knows so much about her and what the late Countess was like, so she decided to postpone her escape and continue the investigation. Suddenly, Cheza was frightened by her brothers, who began asking her about the palace and the place for the ceremony, and the girl, having answered everything in confusion, mentally noted that there was no peace from this family. After Erwin left, the twins started pestering the heroine and she just wanted them to leave her. At this time, Belson, watching everything from the window, realized that Cheza had indeed received a place at the prayer meeting, and mentally turning to his mother, the boy asked her what he should do now. The peaceful Vasilian family began to fall apart when their mother suddenly died, and earlier the Countess told Belson that his father would not be himself. Therefore, the woman wants the boy to protect the Vasilian estate and his family, and Belson, hearing this, swore to his mother to fulfill her wishes. The woman herself felt sorry to place such a heavy burden on someone so young, and with these words she left forever. And the death of the Countess changed everything. Ishuel, looking sadly at his brother, said that he had been looking for his mother since yesterday, but could not find her anywhere. And even Karha doesn't smell her mother and the brother who was in her belly. Belson found it hard that the younger ones, who were too young to understand what death was, were looking for the woman everywhere. And the boy still couldn't tell his brothers about it. Moreover, the Count's condition was much worse than the Countess thought. Erwin neglected not only the affairs of the Vasilians, but also abandoned his children in order to constantly sit with his late wife. And one day Belson approached his father and, covering him with an umbrella, asked him how much longer he was going to sit like that. After all, the Countess would not like to see the young man like this, and the boy asks him to come into the house. However, the Count continued to simply stare silently ahead, unable to find the strength to answer. And Belson, unable to bear it, shouted to his father that he could not fall apart like that. Since Erwin is the serpent who rules the Black Forest, he has duties and responsibilities. After these words, the Count began to laugh quietly, and the boy was taken aback by this, not understanding such a reaction. At that moment, Erwin's quiet laughter turned hysterical. It was the day when the young man reminded himself that he was Basilian, and then the Count decided that perhaps he could resurrect the dead. So, after his mother's death, Erwin finally went crazy. And being next to his father, the boy saw how a man who looked ordinary on the outside slowly and irrevocably broke down from the inside. Finally, disregarding all laws, Erwin dared to touch the forbidden, and Belson witnessed the actions of his father, who was already confident that he could resurrect the Countess. Now the boy believed that he should be careful, because if Erwin's plan finally found its victim, the Vasilian family would be destroyed. And because of this, innocent children will die, and the Countess certainly would not want that. But Belson didn't know what to do, because even the twins started to support this madness, and the main character settled in much better than Belson expected. And continuing to look out the window, the boy mentally noted that if the brother his mother was carrying had been born, he would have looked like Chesa. And remembering how the girl enjoyed life with them, Belson tried to understand what was so beautiful about this place. After all, the boy himself despises absolutely everything. Belson's thoughts were suddenly interrupted by her father, who suggested that he had become warmer towards his sister. At this, the boy turned around sullenly and remarked that the Count should stop sneaking up on him and scaring him like that. Continuing, Belson expressed his displeasure at the young man's involvement of a child in his plan. But Erwin, smiling, suggested that the boy call it pure love. Belson didn't react to this in any way, and asked his father what he was going to do next. After all, the Count publicly announced his participation in the prayer, which means Vasilyan will now find himself in the center of attention. Therefore, the boy believes that it would be wise to begin to expand the family's influence outward. After listening to everything, Erwin remained silent for a while and said that he would think about it. Belson didn't believe his father's words and was sure that he wouldn't even listen to him. Because the boy sees that the Count's gaze is not directed towards the future of the Vasilyan family. The young man looks only at the past, which he does not want to let go of, and the boy understood that Vasilyan could not sacrifice his future to the past. All the more so because of the oath Belson made to his mother. And thinking about this, the boy told Erwin that he would protect this family. Just as the Count is willing to break the rules, Belson will do everything to stop him. A couple of weeks have passed since the day the heroes arrived at this place, and Chesa has already gotten used to the excessive attention of her brothers. Although the main character did not understand why the boys were so happy about their roles as older brothers. But still, Chesa believed that the boys could be useful, so there was no point in ruining the relationship with them. However, the girl did not know how to conduct an investigation with this approach. At that moment, a servant came to the children and informed them that Belson had ordered them to come to him, since Count and Countess Rudin decided to visit the mansion. Once in the office, the woman, seeing the children, said that they were very charming. And Chesa, noticing the Count, mentally noted that it was he who came that night and did not understand why he came to them again. The Countess introduced herself and said that they had been tasked with teaching the children etiquette, and the man added that the Emperor had ordered them to personally greet Erwin's new daughter, so the heroes should take it as an honor. Besides, the Count believes that it was high time to start educating the children. The girl remembered that the last time Erwin didn't get along very well with the man, so it seems to her that Rudin's real goal is observation. At this point, the woman said that it was worth starting with Chesa as soon as possible, because a young lady of a count's house should not behave like a child from an orphanage. Hearing this, the girl was a little surprised and decided not to react in any way, because she considered it stupid that the Countess began by insulting the child. However, Kara thought differently and asked the woman to watch her words. And continuing, the boy put the sword to the Countess's neck, saying that they too hear all this. Ishuel also did not remain silent, saying that they considered it terrible to hear such things. And this makes the boys wonder whether they should kill the Rudins or let them live. At this time, Belson, seeing this, could not bear it and shouted to his brothers. After these words, the boys immediately froze and fell silent. And Belson, continuing, asked for forgiveness and explained that his brothers were simply too young. But the man did not tolerate this and shouted that such behavior was absolutely disrespectful. Moreover, the Count was very unhappy that Erwin had left a child as a replacement. Continuing, the man also said that he now understands how everything is arranged in this house. And for the Count, all this was obvious, because the children's behavior screamed that they grew up without a mother. After these words, the man left, saying that this should not be missed, and that care must be taken to ensure that everything reaches the Count. Ishuel immediately turned to his brother with a request to allow him to deal with the man right now. However, Belson politely asked everyone to stop. And having said this, the boy silently walked out the door. Chesa, seeing this, immediately asked Ishuel to put her on the ground. After all, the girl thought that she needed to check on Balan since she was working undercover anyway, and being nice wouldn't hurt. Walking down the corridor, the heroine was stopped by her butterfly, which led her to one of the doors. And when she opened the room, Chesa was a little surprised, because the boy was sitting on the floor and crying. And the girl, without delay, approached Belson and said that she would also sit here for a while. Chesa herself felt that she had to console her brother, but still the girl wasn't sure about it. And so the main character decided that she would simply sit next to Belson, as she did with Hata. Belson at that moment explained that Karka and Ishwel stood up for the girl Vasilian and not for her own sake. And the boy himself does not want Cheza to become part of their family. So no matter how hard the girl tried to charm Belson, it was useless. The heroine, curious about what it means to charm, handed the boy a flower. Continuing, Cheza explained that the smell of flowers can make people feel better. Belson himself was shocked by this and froze in place. After all, before, his mother gave the boy flowers, saying that if he smelled them, he would feel better. And remembering this, Belson began to cry heavily. But then, having calmed down a little, the boy said that he simply wanted to keep the promise he made to his mother. However, the Count and the Belson brothers behave as they please, and at this rate the Vasilian family will be destroyed. And the boy believes that he must protect his family, since Vasilian is the only place where the memory of his mother lives. Belson wants to protect what is dear to him, so he will not allow the girl to become part of the Vasilians. After all, if Cheza joins the Count's plans, this family will be destroyed, and he doesn't want an innocent child to suffer from all this. The girl, listening to all this, mentally noted that Belson was pretending to be an adult, although he himself was still just a child and was sitting crying in the corner. The boy himself continued and said that there was no point in Cheza getting involved in all this, and he would get her out of here as quickly as possible. After these words, Belson told the heroine to go and not waste time, and as soon as Cheza started to walk out the door, the boy thanked her for the flowers. The girl, when she came out, thought about the fact that not only had Rudin insulted her, but they had also bullied children who were much younger than him, and the main character considered all this outrageous. So Cheza decided to show the Count and Countess what the villain was capable of. That same night, Count Rudin was drinking wine at his estate. The man was glad that Erwin could not have any power over him. After all, according to the imperial decree, the Count was guaranteed a new title and lands. Moreover, the man is confident that he will make Erwin apologize, and even the thought of this lifts the Count's spirits. But while the man was thinking about this and continued drinking alcohol, he fell asleep. And Cheza, watching the Count, mentally assumed that he enjoyed making fun of them. However, now the main character wants to put everything in its place. And without delay, the girl began to use her magic and thereby caused great panic in the Count. And when the man asked who the heroine was, she welcomed him to her magical kingdom. And the Count, seeing Rakisha's true appearance, immediately recognized her and was horrified. The girl continued to mock the man while he tried to understand what was happening. After all, the Count knew that Rakisha had disappeared. And besides, the man didn't understand at all why the main character came to him. The girl herself mentally noted that, as expected, the most fun was playing with people inside the Kingdom of Illusions. And yet, at least here Rakisha can return to its true form. But the heroine can't stay here for long, so she feels sorry that she has to sort everything out faster. And thinking about this, the girl surrounded the Count with chess pieces. And then, Rakisha noticed that the man was caught too quickly and it was boring for her. However, the Count himself was already trembling with fear and begged for mercy, since he had a wife and children to take care of. The girl called it an amazing coincidence, because she also has brothers and a dear father. And after these words, Rakisha began to strangle the man, to which he panicked even more and, again begging for mercy, asked why she was doing this to him. Hearing this, the girl stopped and asked the Count what he thought when he swatted an annoying fly. The man, not understanding the purpose of the question, replied that he didn't think about anything at such moments. And the heroine, approaching the Count, noted why then she needed some reasons to kill him. Then Recenzia wondered where to begin, and remembering the man's words about his brothers who grew up without a mother, the main character decided to start with exactly that. However, suddenly the girl felt a surge of energy coming from outside, and realizing that her appearance was changing, Rakisha was unhappy, since she had not yet finished with the Count. But as soon as the heroine turned into a child, she decided that for now she needed to hide. As a result, the girl hid behind the bookshelves and, hearing footsteps, peeked out from there a little. And Cheza was shocked by what she saw. After all, it was Erwin, and the heroine could not believe that rumors about the morning incident had already reached him, although the girl also assumed that the young man came running because he was, after all, the father. The Count continued to tremble and beg for mercy, sitting in his chair. And as soon as Erwin snapped his fingers, the man came to his senses and looked at him in shock. Then the Count immediately began to accuse the young man of disrespectfully making fun of him in the realm of illusions. Erwin himself smirked at this, and saying that he did not understand what was being discussed, suggested that the man had seen a nightmare. After all, the young man had just arrived at the mansion, as the Count had requested. And continuing, the young man asked for forgiveness and began to use his magic. The Count, realizing that this was black magic, was shocked and asked Erwin where he learned it. And then the man also said that the gods would punish the young man. However, the young man continued to do what he had planned and noticed that the Count could not watch his words either day or night. And hearing this, the man assumed that there had been some kind of misunderstanding, to which Erwin asked again whether the Count really called it a misunderstanding that he had sneaked into his house under the pretext of imperial authority while he was not at home, or that the man insulted the boy's child for living in an orphanage and also teased children for growing up without a mother. And Erwin also assumed that the Count considered it a misunderstanding that he had demanded that he crawl in person to ask for forgiveness. The man himself continued to beg for mercy, saying that if the young man spared his life, he would not dare even hint about all this. But Erwin replied that the Count was unlucky because he really wasn't in the mood today to let him live. However, the man should not worry, everything will happen quickly. After all, the young man has his sweet daughter waiting for him at home. And controlling the Count with magic, Erwin told him not to strain himself and just smile. Cheza, observing all this, mentally noted that the young man was even worse than she thought, because the girl understood that Erwin just wanted to scare the Count, but she didn't even suspect that he would actually kill him. However, Cheza was sure that Rudin had reported everything to the Emperor, and if he was found dead the very next day, then Erwin would be under suspicion. That's why the girl wanted to make it another of the witch's tricks, but the young man made everything even more confusing. And while the heroine was thinking about this, the young man noted that he had to hurry home. After all, Erwin assumed that Cheza was already tired of waiting. The girl, hearing this, came to her senses and realized that she needed to get home quickly. As a result, a little later the main character found herself in the Vassilian mansion, and trying to catch her breath, Cheza thought about how she needed to sneak into the room unnoticed. However, at that moment the Count called the girl, and seeing the young man, the main character became nervous because he could see how she used fairy magic. After these thoughts, the girl asked Erwin when he arrived. But the young man didn't respond to this in any way and simply pressed Cheza to himself. And thanks to this, the main character smelled alcohol and could not believe that the Count was drunk. The young man himself, stepping back, asked Cheza if she wanted a snack. After all, Erwin bought the girl her favorite cookies. Cheza thought that she smelled alcohol in Rudin's estate, but she had no idea that the young man had also drunk. The main character was also surprised by how Erwin killed the Count and assumed that he had thought everything through well. And looking at the young man, Cheza mentally noted that he was on edge, but when he returned home he felt better. After these thoughts, the girl expressed her joy with cookies, and Erwin said that he thought of her and bought them on the way back. The heroine immediately remembered how Erwin spoke about her to the Count and realized that even when she was not around, he still called her his daughter. And now, having drunk, the young man bought Cheza some cookies. And for the first time in a long time, someone cares about the girl like this. At this point, Erwin announced that since he had found the heroine, he could sleep. And then the Count snapped his fingers to move into the room. Already in the bedroom, Ivrin lay down next to the girl, saying that he would sleep with her today. The main character herself was surprised and unhappy that the young man went to bed without even changing his clothes. The young man said that he easily got rid of the person who insulted the Vassilian family. However, Erwin later noticed that he was acting a little strange today. And having apologized, the Count said that he should not have drunk so much because when he returned home, his intoxication began to increase. Cheza, listening to all this, noticed that Erwin, who had cruelly dealt with Rudin, was behaving very nicely with her. And the Count's eyes, which were more suited to the glow of malice, now remind the girl of the eyes of a grief-stricken boy. However, the main character also assumed that it was all just her imagination. At that moment, Erwin noticed that he didn't know what to do, because one look at Cheza and memories came flooding back into his head. And for a young man it is difficult, but at the same time pleasant. After these words, the Count fell asleep. And the main character, looking at Erwin, realized that he still missed the Countess. There was nothing about the Countess herself, not even in the Snake Castle, no portrait, no memorable gifts. And the servants also never spoke about the girl, as if she had become a taboo subject. But on those rare occasions when something was mentioned about the Countess, the Vassilian people began to behave completely differently. However, Cheza knew that this was not something she should delve into. The girl was simply curious to see how much she could resemble the Countess. Yet when Erwin calls the heroine Vassilian, she feels as if she is becoming part of the family. But after thinking about it, Cheza came to her senses and realized that now was not the time for this. After all, the girl spends too much time with this family and forgets that she is here on business. Therefore, the heroine decided that now was the time for an investigation, since Erwin was drunk and would not wake up soon. At this time, life was also going on in the shady corners of the city, and Hata, having greeted the visitor, asked if he could offer something special. But when he saw who exactly had come to him, the young man was horrified. And when Katu was captured, he warned that Rikisha would leave no one alive if something happened to him. And the visitor agreed with this, offering to find out how soon the girl would remember her servant. At this time, Chesa herself went into Erwin's library, since from the moment they arrived in the capital, he had been here almost all the time. Therefore, the girl also believed that she should be careful and find something this time. Thinking about this, the main character began to take books off the shelves using magic. But suddenly, Chesa's attention was drawn to a piece of paper that had gotten lost between the books. And when she started reading, the girl was shocked. After all, on this piece of paper, a report about the witch Rikisha was written. The next morning, the whole Vasilian family was sitting at the table having breakfast, and Erwin, handing the girl vegetables, said that she should eat a balanced diet. And Karha, observing all this, asked his brother what was going on, since they had already finished breakfast. And Ishwal noted that his father's strange behavior was not something surprising. Chesa was already starting to go crazy, because the report the girl found in the library contained some valuable information about her, starting with the mystery of the main character's birth, continuing with the events that Rikisha experienced, and also information about the girl's distant past. And Chesa understood that only a person closely connected to the criminal world could have obtained such information. The girl searched all night but found nothing, and now she will have to sit through breakfast with terrible anxiety. And while Chesa was thinking about this, Erwin said that the news said that Count Rudin had a heart attack. Hearing this, the heroine mentally noted that such news about the Count, who served the great son of the Empire, was not surprising. After all, nobles consider reprisals against themselves a disgrace and often hide it in this way, and Chesa was surprised that Erwin had even thought of this. At that moment, Belson hit the table with his fork and asked his father why he killed Count Rudin. And the heroine, hearing this, was not surprised, because as she had thought earlier, the boy had guessed everything. Belson himself continued and said that he could deal with it. And even if Erwin had not intervened, the boy would have decided everything as befits Vasilian. Continuing, Belson suggested that the father had a sudden sense of duty to the family and asked about it. And the young man, having answered negatively, explained that he killed the Count because he wanted to. Hearing this, Belson remained silent for a moment and asked Erwin if he had covered all his tracks. At this, the young man grinned and asked if he should read the newspaper again. Although Erwin was sad to kill Count Rudin quietly, and he believed that it was all worth doing publicly, because the young man didn't like how the Count said whatever he wanted. And having finished talking about this, the young man said that since they had a new family member, he thought of listening to the advice of his sons to return the name of Vasilian to the arena. Belson was shocked by what he heard, and having come to his senses, the boy noticed that this was indeed what he had hoped for. But Erwin should keep that in his thoughts, because once the young man enters the arena, he will have to restrain himself. The Count himself, having listened to everything, said that the first step would be a banquet organized by Duke Ibroel. Erwin has also already hired a new tutor to ensure that everyone attends classes regularly. The young man then asked Ishwal how the outfits were going, to which he replied that they would be available for pickup at the end of the week. And the young man, getting up from the table, announced that he would free up time to pick up the suits. In the meantime, the boys need to take good care of Shay and stay out of trouble. The girl herself, realizing that Erwin was leaving again today, thanked him for the food. And jumping off the chair, the main character said that it was time for her to go, because Chesa has a lot to do. Ishwal and Karka were taken aback by this, but did not say anything to the girl. The heroine, walking out the door, mentally noted that the aristocrats, proud of their supposed courage, allowed themselves to get involved with the criminal underground. However, in Ervina's case, things are not so primitive and his motives are definitely deeper. After all, besides everything else, the young man showed great interest in the main character, as if she were a fairy. Erwin's goal is to resurrect the late countess, and to do this he resorted to dark magic. But the girl assumed that this alone was not enough, and to replenish his powers, the Count may have turned to fairy magic. And in the process of searching for answers, the young man, according to Chesa, could well have been experimenting on fairies. And now the girl was unhappy that she had let her guard down and thought that Erwin's goal was simply resurrection magic, excluding experiments on fairies. After thinking about this, Chesa decided that she needed help if she wanted to find the connection between the Count and the criminal underworld. Therefore, the first thing the main character needs to do is contact Kata. However, seeing how the butterfly did not know where to fly, the girl was taken aback. After all, this butterfly, created by the heroine's magic, can track the location of the target. The only reasons why this might not work is if the target dies or there is interference from other spells. And thinking about this, Chesa realized that someone had gotten to Kata and became furious. One day, when the sky was covered with rain clouds, the girl met Kata for the first time. The young man became the victim of experiments aimed at creating an eternal puppy, and when nothing worked, he was simply thrown away. Due to the side effects, Hata, unlike other beastmen, could not hide his ears and tail. And the main character considered this to be a very pitiful fate for a creature of legend. But, thinking about it, the girl suggested that there might be a connection with experiments on fairies. And in a normal situation, Richitia would have passed by, but it was this very guess that caused a surge of mercy in her. After some time, Hata came to his senses and awkwardly thanked the main character for her concern. However, either the cruel experiments erased the memory, or for some other reason, the memories left the young man. And realizing this, Richitia noted with disappointment that Hata was not particularly useful. And after thinking about this, the heroine told the young man that if he wanted to survive, he had to hide his ears and tail. And then the girl completely removed Hata's ears and tail with the help of magic. By the standards of this place, Richitia did more than enough for the young man and gave him the opportunity to hide his true nature. But now Hata's fate was in his own hands, so after finishing, the girl asked him to leave when he recovered. However, the young man hesitantly asked the main character if he could stay with her. Hearing this, Richitia mentally noted that the young man should first stand on his feet before swearing allegiance to someone, and after thinking about it, the girl said that she didn't want to keep the puppy. But Hata still followed the heroine, assuring her that he would help her find out everything about the experiments. At this, Richitia turned around sullenly and said that if she had helped the young man once, she would not continue to do so, since she did not have much time. Therefore, Kata chose the wrong person and he should leave. And having said this, the main character was confident that this was enough for the young man to give in. However, Kata still did not retreat. The young man was constantly doing some useful things for Richitia. It was as if the young man did not want to be rejected again and was desperate to prove his devotion. And one day, Hata excitedly told the girl that he had made a piece of jewelry that would suit her. Richitia, looking at the next gift, decided that she should accept it, but do it coldly, so that the young man would understand that he should stop. And after thinking about this, the main character said that she would take the gift, so the young man should stop pursuing her. However, Hata himself was overjoyed to tears that the girl had finally accepted something he had done. And as soon as the young man added that he was very happy, the main character froze in place. After all, this was the first time since Richitia became a witch. Previously, everyone humiliated and avoided the girl, but now someone is happy because of her. And Hata, even after this conversation, continues to desperately pursue the main character. So, in the end, Richitia decided to keep the young man with her. And now, if someone finds out that Kata is directly connected to the girl, they will definitely use him to get in touch with her. And if the heroine wants to save the young man, she must return to her true form, but the reverse potion remains with him. However, if Chesa's disappearance were to be revealed, it would have catastrophic consequences, so she needed to sort out the situation quickly. But thinking about this, the girl carefully looked out from behind the door and was surprised. After all, behind the door stood Chesa's older brothers, who were getting ready to go somewhere. Upon seeing the girl, Ishuel informed her that they had urgent business outside, but that they would play with her when they returned. And while the boy was talking about this, Karka began to hurry him, since they needed to leave quickly. The heroine looked after her brothers in confusion, not having time to comprehend what had happened, but was glad that they left in time. Once in the store, the girl froze in place and was shocked by the disorder. But looking around, Chesa realized that these were not robbers, since the money and jewelry were still there. The heroine immediately remembered the moment when she gave Kata the store so that his skills would not go to waste. And the young man was very happy, promising to make it the best store in the world. Kata really cared about this store, but now everything is destroyed and he is gone. So Chesa decided that she would not leave it like that and would save the young man. After these words, the girl quickly ran down the stairs without wasting a second. While looking through the shelves, the main character saw a growth potion. And according to Chase's assumptions, this potion should just return her to her previous form. And when the girl took the bottle in her hands, she saw a cute inscription that said that this potion was especially for the little fairy. However, this made the heroine frown, as she did not understand why there were hearts there. But suddenly Chase's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the doors opening. It was Karka who, noticing that the store had been completely robbed, remarked that there was nothing to profit from. The heroine, hearing her brother's voice, was shocked and did not understand why he came here. Even though the boy spoke of urgent matters, Chase finds it strange that he came into the criminal world. But a second later, the girl came to her senses and realized that now was no time to think, since Karka, with his sense of smell, would very easily detect her. Therefore, without delay, the main character drank the potion and turned into her true form. And seeing that everything went well, the girl was glad that this bottle was the right one. After this, Richesia decided to quickly leave the store and disappeared with the help of magic. At that very moment, Karka, sensing something was wrong, immediately broke down the wall into the room where the girl was. And looking around, the boy did not understand why there were hidden places in the clothing store. Karha also smelled his younger sister, and walking around the room, the boy began to peer into every corner. But seeing the bottle, Karha stopped and, taking it in his hands, read with bewilderment who it was for. And after examining the store, Richesia went out into the street and immediately caused a strong panic among the people. The girl, looking angrily at the people, shouted and asked who dared to touch the hut. After all, it's better for this person to come out and show himself right now. After investigating Kata's whereabouts in the criminal underworld, Richesia learned something. While the girl was gaining Vasilian's trust, the Holy Knights were walking through the criminal world, and the heroine assumes that the Knights are holding Kata hostage in order to lure her out. So in this case, Richesia has no choice but to throw out bait so that the Knights themselves will fall for it. And now the girl began to actively attack everyone who was on the street. But suddenly someone stopped the main character, tying her weapon with a rope. At this, Richesia immediately frowned and inquired about the identity of the young man. The young man bowed and apologized for his rudeness, and continuing, the young man said that he was Jahan, the master's subordinate, who had ordered him to escort the heroine. Hearing this, the girl understood who they were talking about and was unhappy that the young man decided to intervene now. Little is known about the master's personality, but his skills are comparable to those of holy knights, and the young man is actually the master of the shadow world. Originally, the underworld was part of the Palin Empire. But then, a mysterious curse suddenly struck everything, and the earth turned into a lifeless wasteland where nothing living could appear. And soon, this wasteland became a home for those who could not find a place for themselves in the ordinary world. And thanks to the intervention of the masters, over time, a powerful shadow empire arose and grew. A place where all dark deeds are carried out in silent agreement. And thus the underworld became a neutral zone, and the master was the only one who could maintain order in this place. Richesia knew all this, but she did not understand why the master, who always acts somewhere from the side, was looking for her. And while the heroine was thinking about this, Jahan asked her if he could accompany her. To this the girl responded negatively, explaining that the search for her assistant came first. But the young man said that the meeting with the master was connected with Kata. This surprised Richesia, and she, assuming that the master might know where her assistant was, asked about it. And Jahan reported that his lord sees and hears everything here. The master's whereabouts are unknown to anyone, but everyone has their own guesses. After all, in this country of constant dust storms and dead land, there is a place with completely green plants. And if a person wants to come to this place without permission, then death will certainly overtake him. Richesia, while examining the garden, was shocked by its size and how rich the master really was. As soon as the main character entered the right room, she saw nothing but a table in the middle. And at that moment, Jahan announced that the girl could now start the conversation. And while Richesia assumed that the master was hiding behind the curtain, he turned to her. Continuing, the man noted that this was their first personal meeting. And the heroine, walking to the table, felt the heaviness of being in the same place with the master, but she would not let this shake her. The Lord himself asked the girl if she understood how many problems her behavior was causing. After all, recently holy knights have been wandering around the criminal world. And even the Holy Empire, which is driven mad by heretics, has always followed a clear rule, not to appear here. So this whole situation is really unusual. And the fact that knights are walking here means that someone higher up wants to contact Richesia. The girl immediately realized that among the high-ranking knights, there was only one who could be attached to her, and it was Hylon. But the heroine, although she understood this, decided that she should not reveal it to the master yet. However, as soon as Rakisha said that she knew nothing, the master began to laugh, because the man knew that the main character left her mark on the knight's body. Hearing this, the girl confirmed her suspicions and explained to the master that she simply didn't know anything for sure. However, now it seems to the heroine that the Lord likes to undress the holy knights, since he knows exactly where the sign is. After these words, the master grinned and said that he even liked Rakisha, and the man hopes that the heroine will survive and stir up the entire shadow world with her deeds more than once, so she shouldn't be too interested in him. The girl herself frowned and told the master not to give her orders, but the Lord explained that this was not an order, but advice. Rakisha, having concluded that she simply needed to deal with the holy knights, noted that if the conversation was over, then she would go. To this, the master expressed his hope that the girl would really sort everything out, and he would not have to call her again. After these words, the main character headed for the exit, saying that there was no need to see her out. Thanks to this conversation, Rakisha realized that Halon was the most likely suspect in the kidnapping of Hata, and since the girl left her mark on the Inquisitor, she will definitely be able to track him down easily. Therefore, without delay, the main character moved to Halon with the help of magic, and Rakisha was shocked by what she saw. After all, Kata was lying tied up and unconscious on the ground. Hylan, seeing the girl, expressed his surprise that the heroine came straight to the grave for the sake of that beast. Rakisha herself was angry and noted that the young man had crossed all boundaries. And the young man reminded that on that day there was also a full moon, just like now. So today the main character must answer Hylan why she left him. Then only a little time had passed since Rakisha received the powers of a fairy. On a night like all the others, a girl was chased. However, at that time, the main character had an unshakable feeling that she would actually lose her life. Rakisha never wanted to be a fairy and just wanted a normal life. But in the end, having fallen to the ground, the girl could not believe that everything would end like this. However, suddenly the main character saw someone in front of her and looked up. Opposite Rakisha stood a young man with eyes as blue as the sky and the sea, and the presence of the stranger seemed very divine to the girl. Therefore, the heroine decided that if she was truly destined to die, it would be better at the hands of this young man. And without delay, Rakisha asked the stranger to kill her. However, after some time, the girl woke up in panic on her bed, and looking at her hands, the main character tried to understand when she lost consciousness and why she was still alive. Also, after examining herself completely, Rakisha made sure that her legs were also intact and was very surprised because she really thought that she would die. But at that moment, the thought occurred to the girl that she had been taken alive, and for the main character, this is no different from death at all. After all, although Rakisha was afraid of death, she also saw no point in living a life of eternal running, just to survive. That's why the girl believed that it would have been better if she had died then, and everything would have been easier now. But suddenly, the heroine's thoughts were interrupted by the noise of an opening door, and she assumed with horror that it was hunters. The young man carefully opened the door and looked at Rakisha, and the girl herself was already sitting with a weapon in her hands, preparing to fight back. But Rakisha also didn't understand why Hylan was also in this place, and the main character began to think that the young man was in cahoots with the hunters. At that moment, the young man placed a tray on the bed, assuming that Rakisha was hungry and offering her something to eat. However, the girl, barely holding back her trembling, suspiciously asked the stranger if he worked with the hunters. To which the young man calmly replied that he had nothing to do with these people. After these words, the boy broke off a small piece of bread, and then Hylan himself tried the food, telling Rakisha that it was edible. So the main character doesn't have to be afraid and can eat in peace. Besides, the boys hid far enough away, so the girl is not in any danger in the near future. Rakisha continued to be afraid, because she was always betrayed. But the main character still decided to take a risk and trust one last time, and after some time the girl finished absolutely all the food. However, Rakisha was very ashamed of the fact that she burst into tears in front of a stranger without realizing it. And the main character wanted to understand how much longer she would have to endure this miserable life. The young man, observing Rakisha, noted that today was a beautiful night to admire the moon, because it's a full moon now. Hearing this, the girl immediately looked at the sky and realized that she had not done something like this for a very long time. This moonlit night was so breathtaking that Rakisha was overcome with shivers, and the main character understood that she could enjoy this beauty only because she remained alive. Then the girl turned to the stranger and asked him to clarify whether he had saved her. And having heard a positive answer, Rakisha thanked the young man for his help. The boy himself was surprised by this and immediately blushed. And turning away, Hylon said that he was not going to offend the heroine, so she could relax. Because the young man is a disciple of the Holy Knights of the Empire. Hearing this, Richisha panicked, since in the Holy Empire any heretic is put to death. And the main character realized that she needed to escape as quickly as possible before the young man realized that she was a fairy, because Richisha will suffer a far more terrible fate if the young man guesses. However, the girl could not even get up due to a complete lack of strength. And realizing this, the main character looked warily at the young man. Heilong took the blanket and began to cover Rickesia, which caused her to start to panic. And seeing such a reaction from the heroine, the young man said that he was not going to harm her and that she needed to rest because she could barely open her eyes. Hearing this, the girl realized that the young man was right, because if she tried to escape now, she would definitely be caught due to lack of strength. So Richisha decided to rest a little and leave tomorrow as soon as she could. But the heroine's plan failed due to a sudden fever, even before Heilong had time to wake up. And after another day in which the young man did not deprive Richisha of his care, she finally gained strength. Therefore, when the young man asked the heroine how she was feeling, she replied that she was feeling better. And the girl herself realized that instead of running away, she ended up indebted to Heilong even more. And thinking about this, Richisha asked the young man why he was helping her. However, the young man believed that you don't necessarily need a reason to help someone. And after these words, the young man told the main character his name, because Heilong wanted the girl to at least know his name. And as soon as the young man asked Richisha's name, she became nervous and was afraid to trust him with this information, because he could someday become her enemy. However, the girl also remembered that Heilong had helped her, so she decided to introduce herself anyway. But suddenly the main character was interrupted by a noise outside. And looking out the window, Richisha saw the hunters. The girl began to panic because of what was happening, because she couldn't run now because of the heat. And Heilong, seeing the heroine's reaction, assumed that it was the people who did all this to her. And Richisha, having answered in agreement, noted that it would be better for the young man to leave her and run away, but he did not like this. To this, the girl indignantly explained to Heilong that he too would be in danger if the hunters found out everything, and besides, there were a lot of them, so it was too late to run. However, the young man did not agree with this and said that he had already dealt with half of the hunters yesterday. Richisha was shocked by this, because even she, with the powers of a fairy, had no chance against the hunters, but the knight's apprentice could deal with them without a single scratch. And after thinking about this, the girl said that she admired it, but she also warned that she was not able to repay Heilong with anything. The young man, taking out his weapon, replied that he didn't need anything. And continuing, the young man said that he would return soon, and Rickesia should wait for him. The main character herself just watched Heilong go and said nothing. After all, Richisha could not believe that the young man had saved her for free and was now risking his life. Besides, the girl doubted that she should let Heilong go. However, if the main character wants to escape, then this is her chance. Moreover, Heilong's path is to become a holy knight, and he doesn't need to deal with a fairy, because nothing good will come from the young man's connection with Richisha, and heroes are not the ones you can be around for their own good. Therefore, the girl is confident that her escape will be the best decision. After that, Richisha left, mentally apologizing and hoping that everything would be okay with Heilong. After several years on the run, the heroine mastered her powers to the fullest extent, and in the end, Richisha became a fairy, beautiful as a rose, but cruel as its thorns. Rumors of the girl's atrocities spread throughout the world, and one day she was nicknamed the Fairy Demon. But even when Richisha is committing her reckless acts, she sometimes catches herself thinking about one thing. And this is a thought about Heilong and how his life turned out in the end. The heroine was also interested in whether the young man found out that she was a fairy and whether he regretted saving her. And these questions haunted the girl for a long time, and Richisha's curiosity made her dream of meeting Heilong again. And the main character really hoped to see the young man before she died. But when the heroes met again, it was not at all like what happens in romantic dreams. After all, everything that was between Heilong and Richisha was the desire to kill each other. And now the young man did not understand why the heroine did not answer him. To this, the girl noted that no matter what she said, it would not change the fact that she ran away then. And Richisha considered it stupid to shut down the entire criminal world to find her and ask an insignificant question about the past. Heilong himself ignored this and asked the girl about the reason for her recent disappearance. The heroine was taken aback by this because she thought that the young man had kidnapped Katu to finish the job, but he continued to ask pointless questions. And having thought about this, Rakesha answered the young man that it was none of his business. However, suddenly the girl felt something strange. And looking at her hands, the main character tried to understand what was happening to her. But when Rakesha felt a strange itch, she immediately realized that she would soon turn into a child again. However, the heroine did not know how this could happen because she definitely took the right potion. And this made the girl panic even more. Because if Rakesha turns into a child right now, then Hylan will understand everything. And the main character must not allow this to happen. So thinking about this, the girl began to free Kata. And then Rakesha decided that she needed to immediately get into the magical realm of illusions. And when the main character had fulfilled her wish, she began to transform into her true form. The girl also understood that she had to sort everything out inside, no matter what. After all, as soon as the illusion disappears, Rakesha's child form will be revealed. At that moment, Hylan noted that although he didn't know what the heroine was planning, she definitely wouldn't run away today. Kata, calling the young man a gray rat, told him to stop bothering Rakesha, but the girl patted her assistant on the head, informing him that she was fine and had not yet been eliminated from the game. And then, turning to Hylan, the main character offered to end everything with a deal. Continuing, Rakesha explained that she would give the young man the relic he desired, and in exchange they would go their separate ways. The Spear of Rubius is the girl's prize for defeating the commander of the Holy Knights. The Holy King tried everything to get the spear back, but he couldn't find it in the magical kingdom of Rakesha, and she had fun with the knights using this toy. And now the heroine told Hylan to take the spear and immediately leave the criminal world, because this would clearly earn him forgiveness. But if the young man refuses, Rakesha will smash this relic into pieces. And Hylan has already lingered in the criminal underworld, so if word gets out that the relic has been destroyed, he won't escape the consequences. Therefore, the young man has no choice at all. However, the young man himself did not respond to this, and Rakesha was taken aback, not understanding why he was silent. But after a second, Hylan noticed that the girl was usually in a hurry and didn't think, but now she was trying to negotiate, and this was not like her. That's why the young man thinks that someone is following the main character. And in the opinion of the young man, only he is allowed to catch Rakesha and pursue her. After these words, the girl explained that she simply did not have time to negotiate for so long, so the main character wants Hylan to do her a favor and leave. The young man himself, a little hesitantly, suggested that it was all because of Rakesha's child. The girl immediately grimaced at this and was outraged that Hylan was so fixated on a delusional thought. And thinking about this, the heroine threw a spear to the young man, asking him to stop talking. And then, beginning to use her magic, Rakesha announced that she would take the young man's silence as consent. Hylan did not lose hope and tried to shout to the girl, but the heroine did not react to this in any way and simply threw the young man out of the magical world of illusions. The next day, everything was as usual in Vasilian's house. Luckily, last night passed without incident. The brothers also returned safely in the morning, and it was decided to close Kata's shop. However, the main character had a couple of problems. The first is that Rakesha returned to her child form despite the potion, and now the girl has to wait until Hata develops a new potion. And the heroine's second problem is Karka and Ishwel. Karka unexpectedly went to Kata's store yesterday, but in the criminal world, people don't just go there, and he definitely had a reason. Therefore, Cheza believes that the Vasilian family still holds more secrets than she thought, and now the girl is not going to let down her guard, taking advantage of every opportunity. While the main character was thinking about this, Karka smelled the dog and immediately began to look around. Cheza also caught the scent and tried to understand why it appeared in the mansion's garden. And while the girl was thinking about this, a small dog suddenly jumped out of the bushes. Upon seeing the animal, the main character was shocked, as it was Hata. And Cheza thought that the young man was joking about living with her when he closed the store. And approaching the hut, the girl mentally asked him if he understood where he had come. However, at that moment, the main character felt her brother's gaze on her. And seeing how the boys were looking at her intently, Cheza realized that everything was bad. Therefore, turning to Kata again, the girl began to ask him to hurry up and leave. But Ishwel smiled and assumed that the heroine liked him. And Karha noted that children love small furry creatures. And after these words, the boys decided that they should wash the puppy and leave it in the mansion. The main character was shocked by this and could not believe that the brothers were seriously thinking about taking Kata in. And after some time, the assistant was running around the room, happy that he could finally be with Cheza. A minute ago, Erwin saw his children with the dog and immediately asked about it. And while the boys were telling everything, the main character mentally asked the Count to forbid them from taking the puppy. But the young man smiled and remarked that he could not refuse Chesa, although she still had to love him more than a dog. The girl, although she was unhappy with this decision, was reassured that she now had an ally. And Kata became interested in whether the heroine had finished preparing for the banquet, because she had even sewed children's hats for the boutique. Hearing this, Chesa remembered that at the last dinner it was mentioned that the Ebroel family was going to host a banquet, so it was time to try on outfits. However, the girl had not yet heard anything about the costumes and assumed that something had happened. And after some time, Ishwel, during a meal, expressed his dissatisfaction with the insult to the Vasilian family. After all, the outfits they sent were terrible, and the boy thought that someone was simply making fun of their appearance. And when Karhi said that everything was fine, Ishwel said that the suits didn't look at all like the ones he ordered. And the boy did not want to wear such things, much less have his younger sister wear them. Hearing this, Karha agreed with his brother, because then they would make fun of Chesa. However, the boy also explained that they did not have time to wait for new outfits and could try to decorate these ones. Besides, Karha knows one good store, Kata's store. The heroine was shocked by the fact that the boy was talking very calmly about the criminal world right in front of Ishwel. But almost immediately Chesa calmed down, since the store was closed anyway, and if she kept quiet, the problem would go away on its own. At this point, Ishwel agreed that they just needed to decorate the outfits a little, since there was no time left. After all, this is Vasilian's debut in high society, and the boy doesn't want anyone to look down on them. After this conversation, the heroes entered the room with clothes, and Ishwel immediately said that if he had picked up the fabric, it would all have gone to waste. Chesa, looking around, mentally noted that the suits looked normal, as Karka said, but something was missing. And Ishwel would have clearly chosen something more vibrant for his debut, so it's no wonder he's upset. Although the heroine also feels that the boy is the only one who cares about this in this house. From the first time the boys met, Chesa noticed that Ishwel loved to dress up. The boy also takes care of his appearance every day, even the pallor of his skin. And the main character was surprised that, as a child who grew up in such conditions, Ishwel had unusually good taste. So, thinking about it, the girl asked her brother why he liked to dress up. And Ishwel replied that now he just enjoys doing it. But earlier, for the boy, it was a desire not to look like a street kid who grew up without a mother. At that time, Ishwel did not understand at all what death was, and the boy just thought that his mother had disappeared. But Ishwel didn't like the fact that Belson wasn't answering him at all, and that his father didn't seem like himself at all. And the boy also did not understand why no one was trying to find his mother. Once again, when Ishwel went to look for his mother, Karha reminded him that she was not where he was going. The boy couldn't stand this and shouted back that that's why he wanted to go and see everything, and Ishwel will go alone if necessary, so the brother can do what he wants. But after these words, Karka exhaled heavily and said that he would also go. And so Ishwel and Karha looked for their mother every day. However, one day, when the boy decided to go into the snake castle for a short while, something happened. People standing nearby saw Ishwel and began to criticize him among themselves for his appearance. Strangers thought that the Vasilians had no sense of shame at all, since they dressed like that, being a very prestigious family. Although, having said this, the woman noted that the children were going through a terrible event, and they should feel compassion for them. Moreover, according to the stranger, the fact that the sons are growing up without a mother is immediately obvious. Ishwel was confused by what he heard and, starting to panic, looked at his reflection in the window. At that moment, the boy's brother approached him and asked why he was so upset. And continuing, Karha reminded Ishwel that they were going to look for his mother. However, the boy began to cry hysterically and, falling to the ground, denied that they had no mother. And while Karha tried to carefully ask his brother what happened, he continued talking about how they had a mother and expressing his hatred for those people. From that moment on, Ishwel decided that he would never allow anyone to treat him and his family like that. And at first it was really a necessity for the boy, but now it's not quite like that. After all, when Ishwel became interested in fashion, it even became a little fun for him. But in any case, Chesa is now part of the Vasilian family, and the boy wants to dress her in the best dresses. So the main character shouldn't worry and just trust her older brother. And having said this, Ishwel admitted that he had never told this story to anyone yet, so it was a little secret. At that moment, Chesa announced that she would go to her room because she already wanted to sleep. And Ishwel, carrying the girl in his arms, wished her good night and left. The main character herself regretted asking her brother about his craving for beauty because now she felt uneasy. And while the girl was thinking about this, Kata reported that the hats he made were gone. Hearing this, Cheza remembered Ishuel's words about the possible theft from clothing and assumed that he was right. After all, Kata's craftsmanship was recognized even in the capital's most elite boutiques, so his designs would never be rejected. The heroine didn't want to worry about this banquet, but someone dared to take what belonged to her. And thinking about this, Cheza asked her assistant to contact Mia's boutique. The girl also suggested that Kata open their store for a short time. The next day after lunch, the boys got ready to go to the store to buy hats. But as soon as the brothers wanted to leave, Cheza stopped them. And continuing, the main character asked the boys if she could go with them today. To this, Ishuel responded negatively, since they were going to a criminal area and they should choose a better place for a walk. However, Cheza noted that everything would be fine, since her brothers would protect her. And after hearing another refusal, the main character made a sad face and said that she also wanted to go for a walk with the boys. The brothers couldn't stand this and didn't know how to refuse Cheza. Therefore, Karka, without delay, offered to take the girl with them, since they had never taken her anywhere before and they would still have to try on hats. The heroine, listening to all this, was already glad that her plan had worked. After all, if Cheza goes with the twins, then perhaps she will be able to understand how Villainess is connected to the criminal world. And the girl must also teach a lesson to those who dared to steal her clothes. In the end, the guys all went together. And in the carriage, the boys asked the main character not to tell anyone that they had taken her with them. And just a few minutes later, the heroes arrived in a criminal area. Kadi Ishuel called the hat shop the most decent looking in the area. And the accessories, in the boys' opinion, look very good. And Karka, looking around, saw no one, and disappointedly assumed that today was a day off. However, at that moment Hata came out and bowing greeted the boys. Cheza immediately mentally expressed her hope that no one would suspect that the young man was a dog, because earlier, just in case, the girl had hidden Hata's scent with magic. But Karha, sniffing carefully, still caught the scent and asked the others if the young man looked like their dog. And Ishuel, although he agreed with this, asked his brother to remain silent, since they might be misunderstood. The boy then turned to Kata and asked if they had the accessories they needed, and the young man, having answered positively, invited the guys to try everything on. Hearing this, the boys decided not to delay and immediately began to try everything on their sister. And while the main character was showing how hats fit her, everyone else admired her beauty. And Hata called it all very sweet and said that everything suited the girl. And Ishuel, noticing that the young man had good taste, asked him to pack everything. The boy also continued by saying that Kata's products were better than those of the capital's craftsmen. At this, Hata bowed and expressed his joy that the heroes liked everything. At that moment, Karka asked the young man if he brewed potions. After all, the boy had accidentally looked in last time and seen a bottle with something written on it about a little fairy. And while Hata was panicking, Ishuel interrupted his brother, saying that he was talking nonsense and that the little fairy was their sister. Continuing, the boy asked Karhu to stop pestering the master, as he had to continue making hats. And Cheza, hearing this, realized that the laboratory had been found after all, and now Ishuel had literally saved her from exposure. And in the girl's opinion, it was time to leave before a new interrogation began. Kata, understanding the heroine's hint from her look, asked the boys if they were interested in clothes, because the young man knows one good boutique, Mia's boutique. Hearing this, Ishuel agreed without hesitation, because Hata has good taste and it is worth trusting him. And while everyone was discussing everything, the main character mentally noted that Mia's boutique was one of the best she knew. However, there is still one problem. As soon as the boys entered the boutique, Mia assumed that they were stupid and did not understand where they had ended up, since they decided to come to a crime-ridden area. And with the power given to the girl by the dark streets, she will punish the boys. Cheza, despite always knowing that Mia was strange, was taken aback by what was happening along with her brothers. The girl is human, but she constantly behaves like an animal, and the heroine cannot calmly watch this. At this point, the boys assumed Mia was out of her mind and wanted to leave, but she called it cruel, and Ishuel, examining the girl's work, noticed that she had talent. And then the boy also asked Cheza's opinion, and she replied that she liked everything. Upon hearing this, Ishuel immediately told the girl that they had an appointment in 5 days and needed her to alter their outfits. Mia thought about this, since it would be difficult to do everything in 5 days, but she still asked the guys to let her take a look at them. And the boys, although they didn't understand why their mistress was doing this, still took off their hoods and showed themselves. Mia was shocked by the boys' cute appearance and asked why they hadn't taken off their hoods earlier. And continuing, the girl said that she was now full of determination and would make it by morning. After these words, Ishwel immediately approached Mia and began to tell her about all his wishes. And at that moment, Karka looked around and tensed up a little because he saw something. But after a second, the boy decided that he had just imagined it and began to wait for his brother and sister. After some time, the guys left the boutique and Ishwel happily noted that the walk had gone very well. But just as the boy was about to say that they should hurry, Karha sensed something. And just a second later, the boy protected everyone by cutting the iron net that was falling on them. The criminals were very unhappy about this. After all, shooting arrows is prohibited because men might injure children and their value would decrease. And Cheza, sitting in her arms, did not panic at all, since before this it had been too quiet. And this is a real crime area. At its core, this area is nothing more than a dumping ground for society's unwanted people, and this situation was predictable. And as soon as the men started discussing how much they would now earn at the market, Cheza realized that they were hunters for live goods. But the most dangerous are those who hunt fantastic creatures, and the rest are just beginners. Therefore, the main character is confident that Karka will cope with men without any problems. Ishwel was unhappy that his already rare walk with his sister had been ruined. And continuing, the boy asked Karhu not to let the blood get on him because Cheza was on his hands. After these words, the boy prepared for the attack, asking the heroine to close her eyes tightly. And as soon as Karka ran towards the hunters, they panicked, and the leader ordered them to gather themselves and not hesitate in front of some child. But just as the man was about to order an immediate attack, Karka jumped on him to strike. However, someone suddenly stopped the boy and told him to stop. It was Jahan who explained that the master did not wish to continue this fuss. Cheza, seeing the young man, was surprised, as she did not think that such a trifle required the intervention of a person of his level. Meanwhile, the hunters were bowing in panic and trying to explain themselves to the young man. And just a second later, the men decided to quickly leave, expressing the hope that their behavior had not provoked Jahan's anger. The young man himself approached Karha with a reminder that he had asked not to make a fuss. Moreover, the brothers did not come together, but as a sister, and this time they would not get off so easily. The main character was surprised by the atmosphere between Jahan and the boys, and from this the girl assumed that the heroes were familiar. Jahan is the master's right hand. He shows no emotion at all and wields a whip that turns into hooks. The young man is also called the executioner because those who encountered him rarely survived, so his name became a symbol of misfortune, troubles, and curses. But street fights are commonplace, and Cheza didn't understand why the master had sent Jahan to calm everyone down. Moreover, the heroine noticed that the boys were quite close to the young man, which meant that Vasilian was clearly more connected to the criminal world than it seemed. And while the girl was thinking about this, she and Jahan accidentally met eyes. This made Cheza a little confused, but she greeted the young man. Karka, upon hearing this, immediately became indignant and told the heroine that it was forbidden to greet strangers. Jahan himself noted that it was a great honor for him to greet Cheza, and continuing, the young man bowed, stating his name. To this, the girl immediately replied that her name was Cheza Vasilian. However, Jahan, although he said that he was glad to meet, also expressed the hope that he and the heroine would not see each other again. Cheza was taken aback by this and assumed that the young man did not want to see her again. But the young man explained that meeting someone like him was a bad sign. Hearing this, the girl mentally noted that Jahan was emitting deep self-hatred, although she herself did not think that he was such a person. However, even in the criminal world, the young man is avoided, and Cheza assumes that he has always been alone, just like the heroine did when she was called the daughter of a mad fairy. And if a person remains alone for so long, he begins to hate himself. And thinking about this, Cheza smiled, saying that she was fine and wanted to meet Jahan next time. The young man remained silent for a moment and then turned around, telling the children that it was already late and they had to go home. The main character was taken aback by this, but did not say anything. And the young man, having finished the conversation, headed in the direction he needed. That same night, Jahan found the hunters who had attacked the children, and despite the plea for mercy, the young man killed one of the hunters. Today was the first time someone smiled at the young man. But Jahan also remembered being called a monster and being told not to come near. Therefore, the young man believed that he, such an insignificant person, could not meet with such a noble lady. However, even with this, the young man wants to see the main character's smile again, and he considered this greed. At that moment, someone approached Jahan and asked whether he had greeted the girl. It was the master who remarked that Cheza was very nice, and his assistant agreed. The young man, approaching the hunter, expressed his disappointment that it was just them and not something serious. Hearing this, Jahan immediately apologized, but the master patted him on the head and said that he was not reproaching him at all. And continuing, the master told the assistant that he would finish for him. And after killing another hunter, the master asked Jahan if he had found out the location of the witches. And the young man said that after that incident in the mansion, the girl disappeared again without a trace. To this, the master noted that the witch was not the type to simply hide, and since even the Inquisitor personally went to meet her, she would definitely be of use to them soon. Therefore, the Lord wants Jahan to find the girl and follow her every step. At the same time, the boys returned to the city estate of Villainess. And standing in front of their older brother, the younger ones understood that they were in big trouble. And Belson, looking sternly at the boys, asked with displeasure what they were thinking about. And Ishmael explained that he just thought it would be nice to go for a walk with Cheza, since they had never gone out together. But Belson didn't understand why it was necessary to take the girl to a crime-ridden area. To this, Karha noted that he and his brother were confident that they could protect Cheza. However, Belson said that was not the case. And continuing, the boy reminded that the main character is not from the Babysitting family. This outraged the younger ones, and they began to say that now Cheza was their sister, and moreover, heard everything. But Belson asked the brothers to stop because he was right, and the girl does not have Vassilian blood, which means she is just an outsider. Cheza herself also mentally agreed with this, and remembered that Belson had initially wanted to get rid of her. Moreover, at the upcoming reception, members of the Vassilian family will be introduced for the first time, so the boy wants to get rid of the heroine before that moment. So even if Cheza and Belson cared for each other a little, and some semblance of affection developed between them, they never were and never will be a real family. And the girl considered herself very naive, because she herself decided to participate in this reception, although she planned to leave. The heroine also wanted to kill Count Rudin because he insulted the Vassilian family, and Cheza prepared outfits for the reception so that no one would dare to humiliate the boys, although all this does not concern the main character at all. And when Belson complained to the girl, she thought that he was just a child who easily became attached to people. But in the end, it was Cheza who acted like a child, deciding that she was a member of the Vassilian family. And no matter how lonely the heroine was, she understood that she had become too carried away by this game of family. So the girl decided it was time for her to return to her original plan and pull herself together. Everything points to the fact that this is connected to the criminal world and that there is too much suspicious activity in the Vassilian family. And Cheza must learn everything about the family home and complete the investigation. And when Belson kicks the girl out, she will completely leave with Hata and return to her true self. After some time, the main character came to her room upset. Cheza was very sad because she started to behave like a child. And while the girl was thinking about this, an incomprehensible fog began to appear behind her. The main character felt this aura and immediately turned around. It was Erwin, who had recently returned home. And seeing Cheza, the young man smiled and greeted her. While the girl was trying to figure out where the Count was smelling of blood, he asked her what she had been doing. But noticing the heroine's sad face, Erwin assumed that Belson had scolded her harshly. To this, Cheza responded negatively and mentally noted that the young man already knew everything. The Count himself continued to ask about the bad mood and suggested that the walk had been boring. But after hearing another negative answer, the young man thought about it. And a second later, Belson took the girl in his arms and noted that since her brother had scolded her, all he could do was console her. After these words, the young man began to use his magic, inviting Cheza to look at the flowers. And having moved to the rose garden, the main character began to look at everything in surprise. And feeling the pleasant aroma, the girl closed her eyes and began to enjoy it. But at that moment, Cheza's thoughts were interrupted by the Count, who asked her opinion about the atmosphere. And having come to her senses, the main character asked Erwin where they were. To this, the young man replied that they were in the palace garden, and the girl was shocked by what she heard, because she couldn't be there. The young man continued and explained that this garden was attached to a country palace where there were no guards, so one could walk here in peace. And having inserted a rose into Cheza's hair, Erwin remarked that she looked very harmonious in this garden. But as soon as the Count noticed that the girl was still upset, he asked again if she was sad because her brother scolded her. And continuing, the young man explained that he too would not want the heroine to go to such places, since there are a lot of bad people there. After these words, Cheza asked Erwin if he went to the crime area, but he was taken aback and did not understand why she was interested in this. And the girl explained that she wanted to know this because everyone goes there except her. But the heroine also said that the Count doesn't have to answer if he doesn't want to. After all, Cheza is not a member of the Vasilian family. And after these words, the girl blushed because she just wanted to complain a little. But in the end, the main character herself did not understand why she said this seriously. Erwin, hearing this, thought that Cheza was very offended. So the Count decided to tell the girl something, but asked her to keep it their secret. And continuing, the young man began to explain that his sons help him, but not in dangerous matters. Erwin himself works a little in the crime-ridden area, or rather, manages it. In this area, a young man cares about people, just like he cares about the main character. Cheza, listening to this, began to understand everything. The heroine realized why Erwin had a report with information available only to residents of the crime-ridden area. The girl also understood how the master knew about her mark, and the day when Erwin and the three brothers were absent from the estate coincided with the moment when a critical situation arose because of Halen. And when Cheza went with the boys to the crime-ridden area, it was clear that they had been there more than once. Even Jahan, the master's servant, behaved with a strange respect towards the twins. And thinking about this, the main character came to the conclusion that Erwin was the master. This means that Cheza has been deceiving the master of the criminal world all this time. And if the young man wants, he will kill the heroine without hesitation, so she needs to escape immediately. Already sitting alone, the girl thought that there was a really big problem, that she had deceived the master by pretending to be a child. Moreover, the crime-ridden area is the only place where the heroine feels safe. And if this place turns away from Cheza, then she will not have a single shelter left. But thinking about it, the girl remembered that Belson was going to kick her out before the ball anyway, so she could take advantage of this to leave unnoticed. At that moment, a joyful Hada returned to the room with a finished hat. However, the main character, looking gloomily at the young man, said that they needed to run. The next day, the twins had their next lessons. And seeing this, Cheza was very happy, since the boys had no time for her now, and she could act calmly. After all, even if the heroine has to leave, she must squeeze out all the information possible. Last night, Kata and the girl already searched the mansion and the castle, and now the heroes only have to find out everything about the Black Forest. Once in the right place, Cheza noticed an eerie atmosphere, and that the level of magical energy was off the charts. And Kata and the girl, fantastic creatures, will cope, but if a person lingers in the forest, he may begin to see hallucinations. Thinking about this, the heroine mentally assumed that it was because of this magical radiation that Erwin was so strange after returning from the forest. At that moment, Hata became horrified and screamed, attracting Cheza's attention. After all, a monster appeared not far from the heroes, and seeing the creature, the girl realized that the rumors were true. However, as soon as Cheza noticed that the monster was passing by and was not going to attack, she was taken aback. And, delighted by this, the heroine told Kata that they had little time and needed to inspect everything quickly. After these words, the girl began to use her magic and summoned butterflies. And seeing how one butterfly changed color, Cheza assumed that she had found something and needed to follow her. Therefore, after just a few minutes, the heroes found themselves in a large green clearing. The girl was shocked by this and could not believe that such a place existed in such a gloomy forest. However, noticing the coffin in the center of the clearing, Cheza was taken aback and her emotions changed. And coming closer, the main character wondered whose coffin this was. But a second later, the girl realized that this was the coffin of the late Countess. And seeing the fresh flowers and well-kept landscaping, Cheza assumed that Erwin took care of this place regularly. However, the main character still did not understand why the Countess's coffin was located here. And while the girl was thinking about this, the butterfly flew towards her again. And following the creature, Cheza came to the inscribed tree. But looking around even more, the main character was shocked, since absolutely all the trees around had inscriptions engraved on them. Coming closer, the girl read that the phantom reality is a unique mental area that reflects the subconscious of fairies. And after that, Cheza realized that these were all records of experiments on fairies. The main character also noticed that everything written was donated hundreds of years ago. And continuing to read all the notes about the experiments, the girl realized that this was not Erwin's work and was horrified. After all, this is an experimental report compiled by the Holy Empire. But for Cheza, this was strange, because even if the Empire sometimes behaves hypocritically, it places order and justice above all else. Fairies are heretics to the Empire and therefore subject to destruction, not research. Moreover, the Empire is planning to take the Fairy Queen outside the borders, and if she were conducting experiments, she would have long ago dismantled the crown for research. And after all, Hylon is an inquisitor and has access to virtually all of the Empire's data, so if he found out about the experiments, he wouldn't sit idly by. This means that these studies were carried out in secret and, according to the heroine's assumptions, by someone from the top cardinals or even by the saint himself. These thoughts made Cheza angry, because the main power of fairies is a phantom reality based on their minds. And the minds of fairies are so strong that it is almost impossible to break them, but the heroine's mother has gone completely crazy. So the girl assumed that the woman had been severely abused and had her blood drained until she broke. And Cheza didn't understand how those who call themselves believers could do such a thing. However, the main character will definitely take revenge. And while the girl was thinking about all this, her magic began to strengthen. This made Hata a little nervous and he tried to shout to Cheza, and from another loud cry of the assistant, the main character came to her senses. And after exhaling, the girl told Kata that she was fine and was just a little scared. Today, Cheza realized that the Vasilian family is not guilty of experiments, and most likely Erwin is in the same situation as she is. And the rumors that one of the three great families was conducting experiments came from the fact that the young man was collecting information on this topic and were simply distorted. But the heroine still didn't understand why Erwin was collecting information about fairies at all, and assumed that it was connected with that very crown of the Fairy Queen. At that moment, Hata noted that if the report was genuine, then they should investigate the Holy Empire, and Cheza agreed with this. But the thought that a girl, a heretic, would have to enter the Holy Empire herself is frightening. However, if the heroine continues to hide and secretly participate in the meeting of the saints, Erwin will still expose her. So Cheza decided to return to the mansion for now and think things over. But the girl knew one thing for sure. She no longer had any reason to stay in Vasiliana. That same day, the main character came to Belson's office. And after greeting him, Cheza said that she had something to talk about. Then the girl came closer and asked a little hesitantly about when she needed to leave. The heroine herself believed that since she found out who was behind the experiments, there was no point in her staying in the mansion. Besides, Belson was planning to get rid of the girl anyway, which meant she adapted to his plans. And while Cheza was thinking about this, the boy said that she had to leave in 2 days at dawn. The heroine was upset by this, because these days would pass unnoticed, but if she said that she did not want to leave, then there would only be a fuss. Belson also offered the girl to take anything with her if she wanted, and even if Cheza asks for a fortune, the boy will fulfill it. The main character thought about this for a bit, and said that she wanted to take the puppy with her. After all, the girl came to the mansion with nothing, so she doesn't need anything else. And Cheza, on the contrary, is grateful to Vasilian, because both the Count and his sons were all kind to the main character. Belson himself thought all this was strange and asked again if Cheza really didn't want anything. After all, in the boy's opinion, the heroine had become attached to the mansion. And Belson doesn't understand why the girl doesn't ask to stay, because the boy thought that Cheza was happy in the Vasilian house, and if she was sad, she would at least cry. But now the main character reacts very calmly. The girl, listening to this, was a little surprised, because Belson pretended not to be worried and said that he was not attached to her. And after thinking about it, Cheza said that even if she wanted to stay, she still wouldn't be able to, and she was used to this. Because very often children adopted from the shelter were returned back within a week. So 10 years ago, the main character was kicked out for dirtying the foster family's carpet. And when the girl stood in front of the entrance to the orphanage, she did not know how to explain everything to the teacher. After all, Ritisha returned through her own fault. The shelter is already having difficulties, so if the heroine returns, she will cause difficulties. The woman herself, opening the door, looked at the girl with concern. The main character immediately cringed at this and expected to be scolded. However, a second later, the teacher hugged Rikisha tightly. And then the woman began to ask the heroine about the scars and why she hadn't returned earlier. The girl herself, looking up, apologized to the teacher for returning. But the woman, having said that everything was fine, said that Rikisha could stay in the shelter if she wanted and even become a teacher when she grew up. After all, this is the main character's house. After these words, the main character burst into tears and was unable to answer. But still, Ritisha was happy then, although now the girl will never see her teacher again. And now the main character mentally assumed that she remembered the past, since the current situation was very similar. But after thinking about it, Chesa repeated that everything was really fine, and she was already mentally prepared. Hearing this, Belson said that on the right day, the girl should leave through the main entrance when the Count and the twins would be absent. Also continuing, the boy noted that the heroine should not worry, because he would make sure that she had everything and that she lived in abundance. After these words, Chesa realized that all she had to do was drink the potion to become an adult, and none of the inhabitants of the mansion could find her. After all, Erwin adopted the girl only for the sake of the crown, and if she survives the prayer period, he will no longer look for her. And this is exactly how, in the heroine's opinion, everything will end. However, at that time, Chesa did not yet realize that from the moment she arrived at the Vasilian house, everything was not going as she wanted. The next day, the girl and Kata were looking out the window, and the main character tried to accept the fact that now she would really leave this place. After all, the girl will miss the mansion's garden and the twins, and Chesa is sad that she won't be able to say goodbye to the boys properly. But if the three brothers continue their dark deeds, then perhaps the heroine will meet them again. However, the girl also understood that it would be better for her not to cross paths with the master. However, the main character would still like to know how Vasilian is doing. And so the very dawn that Belson spoke of came. Once outside, the boy told Chesa that all three were currently absent, so her disappearance would not be immediately noticed. Hearing this, the girl got ready to leave and thanked Belson for everything. But the boy didn't answer anything, and the heroine, looking at him gloomily, didn't understand why he was silent. However, a second later Belson told Chesa that he would go with her. The girl was shocked by this and immediately asked again, and Belson explained that the main character had consoled him, so he wanted to help her too. But Chesa also didn't understand anything because she didn't even cry. And thinking about this, the girl reminded Belson of his work. However, the boy grinned at this and noted that his father would somehow sort everything out himself. The main character herself continued to stand in shock and was outraged that her plans were falling apart again. Belson explained at this point that the Count had been dumping work on him all along, so it was time for him to do some work too. And the boy will be with Chesa until the initiation prayer begins, since this way Erwin will not be able to catch her quickly. And the heroine mentally agreed with this, because the Count is a master of shadows and will do anything to find her. Moreover, the girl and Hata still haven't figured out why she became a child again, even after drinking the growing-up potion. Therefore, the assistant needs time to prepare a new medicine, and Chesa agrees to a temporary alliance. Already sitting in the carriage, the main character looked out the window a little sadly, as she had become accustomed to the estate. The girl then turned her gaze to Belson and noticed a magical device in his hands, and it seemed to Chesa that this device was explosive. But still, the main character decided that the boy was not that crazy and exhaled. However, just a second later, a loud explosion was heard behind the carriage. And the girl, looking in horror at the burning mansion, realized that her assumption was correct. And Belson noted that now, due to the consequences, the pursuit will drag on until at least tomorrow. Chesa still couldn't believe what was happening and that the boy had changed so much. However, almost immediately the main character reminded herself that Belson was also from the Basilians, so nothing strange happened. At the same time, Erwin dealt with criminals, noting that there was no end to them. And the young man assumed that since he had been attacked by assassins all day, one of his close associates had revealed the information. But the young man did not understand who it could be. At that moment, a servant ran up to the Count, reporting that there was a fire in the western wing of the mansion. Fortunately, there were no casualties, but the explosion caused a massive fire. Hearing this, Erwin immediately ordered Jahan to send the twins home, and the young man himself, with the help of magic, moved to the place of the fire. And observing everything, the young man understood that there were too many extra eyes now, so black magic could no longer extinguish the fire. But Erwin also realized that Belson had orchestrated all of this, since he was the only one who could so cleverly tie his hands by sending assassins and setting the fire. Thinking about this, the Count asked the maid about Chesa, and the girl reported that the main character had not been seen for a long time. Hearing this, the young man headed into the mansion, expressing the hope that he would not be forced to become truly angry. And the first thing Erwin did was head to the main character's room. However, looking around, the young man did not see anyone, and the Count was horrified by this, not understanding where his daughter was. The next day, Chesa and Belson were already in the capital, and the boy said that he hired children dressed like he and the heroine and sent them outside the capital by hired transport. Therefore, for now, it is better for the heroes not to leave the capital and to hide in the center. The boys will spend the night in this hotel, and at dawn, they will move on. To this, the girl replied that she understood everything, calling Belson young master. But the boy asked Chesa to call him brother, since it was not necessary to be blood relatives for this. After some time, the main character ate and thanked Belson for the food. And lying down on the bed, the girl mentally noted that living on the run wasn't so bad, and besides, even in a child's body she didn't get tired now. And it's all thanks to Belson, because he took care of everything. And turning her gaze to her brother, Chesa was a little surprised, since this was the first time she saw him cleaning a sword, and judging by his skillful movements, he was not just an amateur. The girl also noticed that both Erwin's and Belson's swords were a strange color, and the heroine assumed that these were special swords created for the Basilian family. The boy, noticing Chesa's interest, explained that this was a magic sword that the heir, Vasilian, was forging himself to exterminate monsters from the Black Forest. There are horror stories about the Black Forest, about creatures living there that resist the will of the gods, but since no one goes there, all this is considered untrue. However, only a few knew that monsters really lived in the forest. Monsters that resemble animals, humans, and extinct magical creatures. And the Holy Empire called such creatures monsters, and the Basilian family, who lived near the forest, controlled them. It takes a lot of blood to create a magic sword. 100 days of the master's blood, and 100 days of the blood of various creatures, and then for 100 days the sword is soaked in the blood of monsters from the Black Forest. And after all 300 days, the sword is thrust into the forest ground for another 10 days, and when the blade changes color, a magic sword appears. But to wield such a sword means to accept the responsibility of exterminating monsters. And after so many murders, this duty can only be called a curse. And Belson doesn't want the girl to get involved in all this, and he thinks that she will later be grateful that she left Vasilian. However, Chesa herself mentally noted that she did not think that she would have any special feelings because of this. And at that moment, the boy announced that he and the heroine were leaving tomorrow at dawn, so she should go to bed early. Sometime later, lying down with his sister, Belson noticed that she was still a child and fell asleep quickly. And the boy thought that it would be really good if Chesa really were his sister. At this time, Erwin was sitting in the main character's room and was sad. The young man saw his late wife Rose appear before his eyes, and without delay, the Count immediately extended his hand to the girl. But a second later, Erwin took his hand back and remembered Shay. After all, the young man hates it when his loved ones simply disappear like that, and the Count thinks that he should visit his mentor. Duchess Soraya Fron Ibroel is one of the 3 main aristocrats of the Phelan Empire, a great mage whose power is considered outstanding throughout the continent. Ibroel is taller than most men and has a strong build. The girl also has an unusual, charming low voice and is well aware of her attractiveness. The Duchess also organized and attended balls and dinner parties, and thanks to magical training, Ibroel's body did not age, meaning she combined a youthful appearance with wisdom and great strength. But even such a girl had someone who terrified her, and that someone was Erwin. At first, Ibroel took the young man for a hallucination, but when he greeted her, she was horrified. And throwing a glass at the young man, the Duchess told him to leave, calling him a demon. Erwin himself expressed his dissatisfaction with the way he was being greeted after so many years. But the girl ignored this and asked what had happened, because she understood that the Count had not come to ask for the fire in his house to be put out. And the young man, clenching his fist, asked Ibroel to help him find his youngest daughter. Erwin then knelt down and called the Duchess his mentor. The girl was shocked by this, because Ibroel immediately remembered how Erwin used to call her that when he was younger. And thinking about this, the girl noticed that the Count was a cunning snake, since he used an appeal that she would not be able to refuse. So in the end, the Duchess agreed, but in exchange, she asked Erwin to send Ishwal to her. After all, Ibroel had long ago said that the boy had a talent for magic and that he was destined to shine. To this, Erwin reminded the girl that Ishwal did not want to study yet, but if he changed his mind, he would immediately send him to her. The young man then explained that after the fire in the house, he could not personally search for his daughter. Although the Count is still going to use his powers, if Ibroel helps him with magic, then everything will go faster. Hearing this, the girl immediately understood everything, because the fact that Erwin uses dark magic is a secret. And if the Count uses large-scale tracking magic, the Inquisition will definitely track him down. After these thoughts, Ibroel reported that tracking magic requires a body part from the subject itself or a blood relative. To this, the young man replied that he had nothing and offered to use his blood. After all, Erwin is sure that Cheza is with his eldest son. Hearing this, Ibroel smirked, assuming that the children could not stand their father's temper and ran away. But in any case, the girl herself will do everything quickly and show Erwin the door. At this time, Cheza and Belson were fast asleep. However, suddenly the main character felt magic and opened her eyes. And then, turning to Kata, the girl told him to get up quickly. After all, the shape of a magic circle appeared on the ceiling, and Cheza immediately realized that it was a tracking spell. However, judging by the purity of the energy and the color of the magic, the girl also realized that it was definitely not Erwin, and only one person on the entire continent is capable of using such precise tracking magic, and this is Duchess Ibroel. But the girl didn't understand why Ibroel used magic and not Erwin, although Cheza also remembered that Vasilian's first social event was a ball at the Duchess's, which meant they were acquainted. Therefore, the main character must not allow herself to be caught. And although the girl cannot resist the great magician, she has the power of fairies. So, if the spell is stopped at the stage of forming the magic circle, then Cheza has a chance. And thanks to the soporific flowers, Belson will sleep soundly and will not know anything. The heroine understood that no matter how strong Ibroel was, she had hardly encountered the true power of a fairy, since they were almost extinct. And even if the Duchess met with fairies, their power was used only for escape, because they by nature avoid battles. But Cheza is different, and if she can awaken the powers, she will destroy everything and escape. So the girl is seriously determined to show Ibroel what fairies are capable of. After these words, the main character flew into the air and destroyed the magic circle. This caused the Duchess to cough up blood and freeze in shock. After all, Ibroel's magic was destroyed in one blow. And realizing this, the girl immediately indignantly turned to Erwin and asked if there was anyone with Belson. Because the Duchess herself feels that next to the boy, there is someone as strong as she is. At that moment, Cheza exhaled, but she understood that even though she had managed to destroy the magic, Erwin would find another way to track her down. Besides, even Belson hardly expected that the Count would turn to a third force for help. Kata, coming closer to the girl, suggested that she set fire to the snake's castle, but she immediately responded negatively. After all, Cheza herself believed that while she was in the body of a child, it would be better for her to attract a third force to her side and use it as a shield. The main character wanted to find someone who had a high position of power like Ibroel, and at the same time possessed enormous strength. And thinking about this, the girl realized that she knew one very suitable person. The Duchess, meanwhile, was trying to understand how exactly her magic had been destroyed, as it was a mystery even to her. And remembering Cheza, the girl assumed that she had incredible magical potential, because sometimes future magicians unconsciously manifest their power. And in response to Erwin's negative response, Ibroel said that she was confident and saw such potential for the first time in 68 years. And the Duchess can't just watch such a child go to waste, so she has to help too. However, Erwin was already beginning to worry, because if someone stronger than Ibroel ended up with Cheza, then she would be in danger. All the other members of the Vasilian family were in a temporary shelter, the Hotel Carmine, in the center of the capital. The boys came to their father and looked at him questioningly, as he had called them, and the young man, without delay, gave his sons the letter from Belson. The boy himself wrote that he would not allow their family to commit an irreparable sin and for an innocent child who was not Vasilian to suffer as a result. Belson makes this decision as Vasilian's heir and is ready to bear any punishment. After reading this, Ishwel emphasized the words about Cheza not being part of the Basilians. After all, the boy remembered how Belson had said something similar earlier, which meant he could have taken her. And Erwin, confirming this, said that the boys needed to be returned home safe and sound. This made Ishwel a little nervous, and he hoped that his father wouldn't get angry and that Belson and Cheza would actually remain safe. And Karka, throwing away the letter, asked the Count whether he really intended to accept the girl into their family. And Erwin responded positively to this, saying that they would continue to raise Cheza as Vasilian. But the boy did not understand anything, since earlier the Count wanted to use the heroine and throw her away. So now Karhi is interested in what has changed and why the young man cares so much about Cheza. After all, the boy himself thinks that the reason is that the main character is very similar to their mother. And Karha wants to understand exactly how her father feels, because another child could be found to take the crown. Moreover, the boy does not believe that Erwin will be able to bring the Countess back to life. But Karka still believes that the Vasilian family needs Cheza, and not for the sake of getting the Countess back. After all, when the main character is nearby, according to the boy, their family misses their mother less. And now the whole Vasilian family no longer cries, but smiles. Irvin was a little surprised, as he always thought that Karka was the most withdrawn of all the children. But now the Count realized that all this time the boy simply wanted to be noticed and understood, and the young man completely agrees with his son's words. Thinking about this, Irwin mentally turned to Rose, as he had been feeling strange lately. At first, the young man simply brought Chesa to save the Countess, and thought that being kind would make it easier to win her trust, and that's all. But perhaps because the girl was too similar to Rose, the Count began to treat her better than he intended. When the young man sees the main character upset, he himself begins to worry. And the important thing is that Irwin started smiling again next to this child. Therefore, the young man really wants to know what the Countess would say now if she were here, and how she would explain it. And after these thoughts, the young man began to answer his son's question. However, Irwin was suddenly interrupted. It was Jahan who reported that Chesa and Belson had been found. And one holy night took the children with him, and that night was Hylon. At this time, the young man himself was informed that about a third of the mansion had completely burned down, and Darren assumed that the Vasilian family had temporarily moved to another place. And having said this, the assistant immediately looked at Halon. After all, it seemed to Darren that the young man had been behaving even more strangely lately.